No, the thing is, that was just like an example of where that's what, like, I mean, we should probably just do this in the live episode, but that's half the reason why plebs now don't really know Faker. They just know the Faker of the modern day. Is the guy used to literally be the best at the most vanilla control mage and all the fucking super aggressive assassins at the same time. Like, he wasn't just some guy who was doing like one thing, you know. He's the best at everything, wasn't he? It's ridiculous.
So this will still be part of the show, like through the editor just putting it in the intro. And then, well, my 2 cents is, even though he was an amazing Orianna, like when you think Faker, like when you think old school Faker, I think of the outplays and kind of the synergy with Bengi. And a lot of it is more through LeBlanc and Ahri, more so than Orianna. Like Orianna was like super fucking important, but I don't think it is that iconic. It's just like it's hard to say Orianna is like an iconic. The iconic moment I remember for his Orianna is like the Rocks Tigers one, where he's running away and he actually gets away from like 4 people from Rocks Tiger as Orianna. But there's just like other moments with Faker.
This is like 2016 you're on about, yeah?
Yeah, glued in my mind regarding Faker.
Yeah. That's just Orianna though, mate. It's not that interesting champion, is it?
Yeah.
The whole point. That's why she's the basic bitch of mid lane.
Dude, if you go to his most played, like the other things that are up there is like Lulu. There was like
gonna be garbage, of course. Yeah.
It's crazy that he played so much Lulu during like that era with Bang.
Right. This is going to be episode 48 of Listen Loco, and we were supposed to do this earlier in the week. But in fact, on the episode that had Curry, but the problem was, because that one was about LCS finals, obviously we just spent too much time talking about it and it just spilled over way too much. And so rather than just ram it on the end and have it last like 20 minutes and then shortchange everyone who watched the LCK, we'll do like our own episode on this match. So being as, let me think. I think when we had...
LS.
Yeah, the last episode was before this final, right? It was after the Kingzone series. Yeah, it was. So we only had this one match to preview. So what we'll do is a bit like you'll probably see at some point in this episode where we like chopped together a part that we were talking about as a side point coming in. We won't just talk about this final. We'll talk about some other things afterwards as well, because I doubt the one final alone, especially because it was a 3-0, it's obviously not going to contain that many talking points, but there is still a lot you can talk about around. So let's start off here, which is every single person on the show, from what I remember, picked Griffin.
Yeah.
Almost every... This is actually where I saw Ashley trying to like clap back at me on fucking Twitter or whatever. Because what happened is, right, quick story time here. After G2 won LEC, a lot of people, myself included, were like, actually, if you look at how this team just played now, they could just fucking win MSI. Like, you know, it's not even implausible. They could just beat SK Telecom. At which point, all the plebs who'd watched SK Telecom the same fucking day were like, hey, wait a minute, SK Telecom is going, you know. And I've noticed, right, this is just something that pisses me off, Loco, is that one of the reasons I always used to hate people saying that Monty was like, you know, just biased in favor of Koreans by default is because what they ignored was, actually, that's not what he used to do at all. What he used to do was pick one Korean team and be like, yeah, they're the gods. Like, so it was SK Telecom, it was Samsung White, you know, and be like, yeah, this team will fuck everyone else up. But the other ones, yeah, it's more debatable, you know. What everyone else does is what everyone used to pretend Monty did, which is they just go, whatever number one Korean is must be the best in the world, like by default. Like, it doesn't matter the context, the situation. So the reason why that doesn't work, Loco, is most Westerners thought Griffin was going to win this match. But as soon as Griffin didn't, they're all claiming they know SK Telecom's like unbeatable, they're the best fucking team, which that doesn't really add up because they themselves just predicted Griffin would win. Now, the clapback was that when Ashley was sort of like, well, I actually think that SK Telecom was like, yeah, oh, no shit, Ashley. You think that the Korean team's got, fucking hell, I can't, my brain can't process it. How does this work? Tell me more about this fascinating opinion you must have. Oh, what's that? Why are you turning to the photo page of your passport? What does that have to do with the discussion? Like, come on, how fucking obvious is this? So obviously everyone from Korea is so mind-fucked. They have to believe the Korean team's the best, no matter what. And the reason why that's actually a bit egregious, Loco, and we'll get into this in the episode in a minute or two, is this isn't actually an example of where you look at the Korean team and you're like, they're clearly just number one. No one could ever beat them. Like, there's probably a lot we can discuss about that. And actually, there's some quite fun hypotheticals if we want to talk about MSI once we talk about this match, because what her clapback was when she said SK Telecom, my response was, yeah, but most experts didn't even pick them to win their own final, which is true, actually. The difference is, though, she then used the logic of, yes, but there was a poll that said all the Korean coaches and players said that they would win. It's like, I don't actually consider those people to be the experts. I'm talking about the experts, people I know watch LCK. The people, if you saw in that thread of all the Western casters, where Kenzie, that famous journalist from Korea, polled us all. He said, like, who do you think's going to win this match? And if you look in that thread, I think the only the only person who picked Griffin, I think there was maybe two people, SK Telecom rather. I think there was two people picked SK Telecom, maybe even just one. I don't think even Papa Smithy in the thread picked SK Telecom. I think even he said 3-2 Griffin. Almost everyone had Griffin by some measure. Most people 3-1 and 3-0, by the way. So I'm just putting that out there because everyone loves to do this thing in League of Legends. We're worse than other games, by the way.
You're going to hate me, but finish your point.
Which is just lie and say that you thought the other team was going to win. And so the reason why this one's so egregious is because anyone who thought that, like, for example, I had Griffin winning 3-2, and I already explained the reasons why. Teams get way worse when the finals come along and they're just sat in the final, right? Anyone who says, like, oh, I had Griffin 3-2, and then they're like, yep, I always thought it was a possibility you guess get Telecom 3-0. It's like, you're just a liar. You just, like, that's just a lie, what you just said. So, okay, what were you going to say here? Come on, what bullshit, like, pivot immediately where you're going to claim you knew even though you picked fucking Griffin?
So I felt really I felt a lot of peer pressure because you and LF were so strong about it. And I honestly didn't lean one way or the other. And I had a slight feeling that SKT was going to win, and I couldn't put it into words why. And when I listened to other people, they gave me better reasonings on why they picked SKT, and I agree with it. So I will agree with you. I think majority of Koreans had a bias towards it, and I can also tell you why the coaches picked SKT so far over Griffin, and why the result of 3-0 SKT wasn't surprising to people that were internally scrimming, and even to a certain regard, Griffin themselves, why they got shut out by SKT. So, I mean, in general, there's always a kind of the national team, right? So even though football is an American sport and all 32 teams represent America, Cowboys are the American team, or the favorite team wherever they go, right?
It's the most iconic for all.
Yeah, it's the most
USA,
iconic.
Yes.
And everyone always root for Cowboys to win. And in general, like, people want the Cowboys to win, and it's more popular when Cowboys are winning. So for Korea, that team is very much SKT. I mean, OGN loves it or I guess OGN doesn't even care now. Riot loves it when SKT wins, and majority of the fan base loves it when SKT wins, and especially for the Korean fan base, they love it when Faker wins. So there is a certain, I would say, bias towards SKT winning for the Korean side.
Sure.
And then when we get into the experts, and why the kind of finals were so one-sided, every coach that I talked to and every player that I talked to were talking about how godly SKT looked and how much further that SKT kind of distanced themselves. I'm sure we're going to get more into it in detail when we talk about game by game, but Griffin didn't opt into standard comps because they felt like they couldn't beat SKT in a standard 5-on-5 setting. They felt like they could.
I mean, that part's obvious, mate. That's the first thing I said when I saw this fucking final. It's like, great, even Griffin didn't think they were going to win. What the fuck's the point in this? So he just knew from the draft alone.
So I think, like, actually, like, if you were in, like, the midst of Korea and amongst all, like, the Korean hyphiness and, like, talking to more Korean people, we would have, like, leaned SKT also. But majority of Korean coaches and, like, the Korean casters, they all picked SKT, and Griffin was, like, the odd choice out. And, like, Korea as a whole felt like SKT was going to win, just due to how people were talking about it on talk shows, like how they were talking about it on broadcasts and even on streams, and, like, people internally talking. A lot of people felt like SKT were going to win over Griffin.
Well, let's start with this topic. By the way, just as an aside, that's actually one area where Koreans famously aren't particularly good. For anyone who thinks that Koreans, like, are the gods of every single function of life, they're not. Like, one area they're not very good, by the way, is predictions. Like, if you've ever been through any of the Korean finals, like, the most famous example ever is the most legendary caster I guess he used to be in the history of Korean esports. He used to be Kim Carey,
Oh my
the
God.
most famous StarCraft guy. Now, I guess he probably isn't anymore, because actually I would guess Caster Jun is probably the most popular now if you think of the modern era.
I'll tell you a small story. Finish your story and I'll add on to it.
And what people won't know about this Kim Carey guy is, I'm not, when I now tell you he gets all the predictions wrong, saying he's wrong. Because actually, if you know my opinion, I don't think predictions have very much to do with analysis. Like, predictions like telling someone at the end of their analysis, right now, decide which of the two gets the advantage there. Whereas it's like, well, all I was telling you was like how they would get an edge, where their edge would be, what they should probably do, what they might do. So the point is, right, this Kim Carey guy was legend for having a curse where he picked the wrong player to win the star ladders like OSL, MSL so many times it's unreal. Like some of his curse ones, Loco, were like almost unbelievable. Like it's one thing if he just, the finals was happening, he picked the wrong guy. He used to do some epic ones where he would do like pre-season predictions and he'd be like, well, there's one thing I know, it's that this guy's definitely not winning. And that guy would have like the career best split, like win the whole fucking league, like revolutionize his race and stuff. And the point is, like, that's one area I've noticed, the whole analytical world, where Koreans did get overrated. And part of it, unfortunately, is not just because of the success. It's actually because of people like Monty, where they always used to tell the Westerners, like, oh, they're years ahead in terms of infrastructure. It's like, yeah, we just mean basic things by that, though, Monty. Like, for example, they had a 2-coach system and you obey the head coach and stuff like that. They are ahead on. But, like, Korea isn't, it's not like Russia in chess in the 1950s or something where, they've got like thousands of people dedicated to analyzing the game. No, we're not on that level. Like, people always exaggerated that. So I'll just say that, which is like the sentiment in Korea sometimes can be right like this. It can sometimes be very wrong, though. Like, for example, if you'd have done a poll with anyone, again, actually including the team in the game, of the famous MVP Ozone versus CJ Blaze, everyone, including MVP Ozone, by the way, would have said Blaze would win. In fact, I even did an interview with him a few months later where he admitted the same. Like, he literally said when they played, they thought they were going to, like, just try and win a game or something mental like that. Just as a quick aside.
So mine's like a more side tangent, but just an interesting fact. So Kim Carey, after his show kind of failed on OGN, the Kim Carey show, that was a really budgeted show, by the way. Carey was getting paid less than his normal amount, and like Kim Carey was kind of getting pushed out from OGN. One thing that kind of cemented his exit from League of Legends, or an exit from esports in general, he took a sponsorship on for kind of like nightlife in Korea, where he acts like a host. Like there were advertisements for Kim Carey, like, come to this bar, come to this nightclub. And then like he got hammered by the community for that. They're like, wait, what the fuck are you doing? Like, why are you advertising like this like dirty like nightclub and like nightlife scene? And then now he's doing gambling streams where he gambles live on Africa. So like Kim Carey's fall from grace so much. So if you talk about iconic streamer or iconic casters, it definitely goes to Caster Jun.
So, okay, in this final, Griffin was playing the role of Kim Carey because they clearly were just up too late, thinking about the wrong things. They gambled on some stupid-ass drafts. And in the end, they invited SK Telecom to a dingy, horrible nightlife area with a rubbish after party. And SK Telecom said, actually, we'll just 3-zip this series, put you in a fucking body bag, give you the send-off that you deserve, sir. And then we're going to the SK Telecom after party, which literally looks like it's on the deck from fucking Star Trek The Next Generation, because that's how much money we have flossing with, motherfucker. Did you see? We literally bought Khan for no reason. The rest of the team, all sick. We bought Khan just to style on y'all. That's it. So anyway, that's the end of that metaphor. Let's start with that, though, right? Because the thing is, Loco, you confirmed it here, but that is literally the first thing I said when I was watching this final, is especially when Griffin in Game 3 went back to that same draft. I literally said out loud while watching the game by myself, like, so even they didn't think they could win. What the fuck was the point in this final then? Like it's one thing right? So I'll give you an example. The TSM versus Team Liquid one's an interesting one, right? Because even though TSM were on paper the underdog, quite a lot of people thought TSM had a chance to win that. A lot of people thought, hey, stylistically they match up. Like coming into this one, like I said, a whole bunch of people were like, let's not get too crazy about like the last weeks of the split for Griffin. They're still an amazing team. SK Telecom didn't look that sick against Kingzone. Hey, this is very doable. They're still the better squad. But you can actually tell based on scrims and how they chose to draft that Griffin themselves literally thought they had to cheese this series. Like they did not think they could win 3 out of 5 straight up against SK Telecom. And the reason why I emphasize that, Loco, is because that's a fucking massive deal. Think of the Griffin that played SK Telecom at the end of the second rotation in that best of three everyone remembers, probably the match of the season overall. That Griffin knew they could beat SK Telecom straight up. In fact, that was what made Griffin so scary, if you ask me, was that when they would do the cheese comps, like the weird fucking flexes early in the split, that's because they knew they were incredibly strong. They weren't doing that as like a gimmick. Whereas this showed to me, they did not believe that if they played a normal comp against SK Telecom and the game went to like 38 minutes, that they could win the game. I genuinely don't think they believed that from watching them play.
Yeah, so what was really weird for me is I would say Griffin probably has two weaknesses versus SKT. It's top lane and bot lane, and more specifically for bot lane, I think the difference between Viper and Teddy on pure AD carry champions later on in the game is much different, like in terms of team fighting prowess and how good they are. And Thord actually held up very well versus Khan. I think Thord was not the weakness for Griffin, and it was way more so bot lane. And SKT dissected Griffin bot lane so well. By never allowing them access to Kalista and Galio, I think it made Griffin bot lane look so bad and took away like core part of what makes Griffin Griffin. The fuck? He dropped. Oh.
Wait one second. It just rebooted itself for no reason. Like, keep going.
Yeah, but...
Oh, wait a second. I'll turn my cam back on.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think by banning Kalista Galio, they knew exactly what Griffin bot lane was good at and what Griffin overall as a team comp needed from bot lane. Like Griffin is a team that does so well when they have multiple engages, multiple CC, a lot of ways to bounce aggro, to reset aggro through Galio ult, through Kalista ult, through stopwatches, and SKT recognized that, and by never letting them have Galio and Kalista, I think it screwed Griffin so much in draft.
And also, they made sure that 2 of the 3 games they got Brown, which was also one of the champions that, again, you needed actually for Lion. Lion's actually had a pretty limited champion pool, mate. I don't know why people like hyped him up personally. I think he's, along with Sword, the worst player of that team, clearly.
A lot of people that when they play versus Lihan, he gets so much credit, and people think he's really great. I never played versus him, and watching from like outside in, it's hard to say like if he's like spectacular.
You mean actually from scrims and stuff, or just in official matches?
So people, whenever they talk about Griffin, one of the people that gets so much praise outside of just like the normal Chobi Tarzan, I would say is Lihan over the other 3. Like a lot of support players and a lot of teams that scrim them give him so much individual credit, and it's usually like, oh, this guy's so insane, like this guy's so good at mind games, like he knows where to be. So I heard that comment from Ning, I heard that comment from Mata. So these are like high tier support players that get to scrim Griffin, like give so much like great comment towards Lihan. So there must be something there, and this guy must be like a fucking genius.
Sure. So okay, let's start here, Loco, which is, so I'll just say, for anyone who didn't watch this game, I'll quickly run through what the picks for on the Griffin side were for game 1. So game 1, they ended up with Silas top, Olaf jungle, Akali mid, and then the bot lane was, this is not an exaggeration, anyone, like, you know, this is not an audio error when you hear this. Their bot lane was Talia and Pantheon. So they literally went for a bot lane nobody else has played, and in fact a team comp that doesn't exist and never has existed, because obviously Silas is a new champion. And basically across the board they gambled, with the exception of jungle and mid pick basically. So what do you make of this? Because when I saw this one here, like, as you applied before, by the way, that tells you right there that they're like, oh, mid and bot lane, we're in fucking deep shit, so we better just go with some cheese. Like I don't know what they were thinking on the angle of this bot lane overall. Like, they must have thought this was some super secret counter that works amazing that no one's seen before.
So this is people call it the LS bot lane or the barbecue bot lane, because this is what LS's challenger team played in their games. And then people also call it Avengers because it kind of looks like Captain America and Iron Man for Talia and Pantheon. So this was a very prepped strategy from Griffin. They banned Morgana and Tahm Kench, and they wanted to play this. They banned Morgana and Tahm Kench because they were like, you can't have Morg and Kench when we play this comp, and we want to bust this open. So how they wanted to do was, we set up a dive. We early invade and we set up a dive and we make sure we dive them, and they didn't get that dive off. And another part of that duo is after level 6, you swap, you recall, and then you look for the swap top lane with double global on Talia and Pantheon, and they didn't get that off either. basically this set of champions, Tilly and Pantheon, it's incredibly important to get ahead early and constantly snowball. And SKT, I think, understood that really well and made sure they never gave them any kind of those dives or any kind of those openings. Like, they stayed high in HP, they picked champions that are hard to dive in Israel and Braum. And Klid also did an amazing job of making sure he's there every single time they're setting up a dive and not allowing that dive to happen. So I think Griffin, it is fine for game one to come in with a cheat strat. I think that's completely fine. If you're going to play Sonateric, if you're going to play these like weird ass stuff, do it in game one and see if it works and go from there and force the enemy team to constantly ban out the Pantheon or the Talia or the Sona or the Taric. But yeah, like SKT just read it so well and it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, but what was so depressing about this series is, like, even from watching the series, I don't think Griffin was actually accurate with their read, that they were so far behind SK Telecom and they couldn't have played any of these drafts straight up. Because what's ridiculous is these two stupid drafts, which I didn't even think were good, were the two games actually where they had moments in the game where they were actually doing decently, like they had an early edge or they looked like they were getting into the game, and then it just got completely out of control and they couldn't fight in half these scenarios. So, like, I think conceptually they were wrong on this move. Like, I think if they had just come and played normally, I'm not saying they would win, I don't know that, but I think they would at least have won games. Like, this first game was looking pretty good for a while.
There's the thing though. The fact that the game looks good and the game looks even is really bad for Griffin. So Pantheon Talia is just like milk. It spoils in a fucking day. Like, it'll spoil like crazy. So you need to make sure you get ahead and you need to make sure you're snowballing. And the fact they're not snowballing and they're just going even with SKT, and the fact that it looks fine or it looks good and they're picking up dragons is so bad for them. And SKT understood that completely. They didn't take on any major fights before 15 minutes. And by the time they're taking on major fights, Israel has his 2 items. He's going into third core. Like, Pantheon isn't a champion. Talia isn't a champion. Like, it is not going to work. So I think the early game looking fine for Griffin and the early game looking competitive is way better for SKT when you draft a comp like this.
Okay, because the only game for me that was like a true mega stop was like the second game. That was the one I seem to remember was the one where it was like they were just out the game the whole time then, which also, interestingly enough, was the only game that SK Telecom played on red side. So how does it work in LCK? Do you know how they decide who has the side choice?
I would guess so there's 2 ways of doing side choice internationally, and every region switches it up, so it's hard to keep up. It's either the higher seed gets side control for 1, 3, and 5, or the higher seed gets control for game 1, and the loser picks game 2, and the loser of game 2 picks game 3, and so on. So I honestly don't know the system that SKT uses.
Okay. That part's irrelevant, then. We don't have to talk about that. What did you actually think, then, about them going for 2 Silas picks in this series as well? They only played 3 games. They went for 2 Silas picks.
So SKT is kind of allowing people to pick Silas. So their go-to is, you pick Silas, we take Rise, and we're confident enough that when we get Rise, we're able to carry. And Rise is more flexible as a champion, and we have good enough Rise players in Khan and Faker where the additional bonus of it being a flex is worth in terms of giving you a Silas and picking up a bonus pick. So I think that's kind of SKT's approach and look into Silas. I still think Silas is fucking crazy, and you need like god tier Rise players like SKT has for it to be worth.
Then the other thing as well was that in game 2 of this series, Griffin also did one of my pet peeves, if anyone's been listening to the show for the last month and a half, a fucking low damage Lissandra mid comp. And you know what, Loco? Have you noticed a trend here, my friend? It's not like I only bring it up every once in a while. The majority of these comps fail. You know that, right? There's only a few mid players that really, really do well when they're on Lissandra. Like, the rest of them, either you are just sacrificing, like, well, I'll just set this other guy up to carry, or you do it because there's someone insane in another bot. Like, I understand if you do it and you've got some monster bot lane that's like fucking Uzi Eye or something, like, yeah, that might make sense. But this one here I thought was another whack example, and they had no way into this game whatsoever. They were fucked.
Yeah, so we can talk about the level 1 little, because I think that's where the game really broke apart for Griffin. So they had Braum, so they're invading with their level 1, which is like a very normal thing to do. Braum is the strongest level 1 champion, and you definitely want to make sure you take advantage of it. So they invaded with 4 people. onto the red jungle of SKT. And SKT kind of mind gamed them, and they made Khan stay. And later on, when the red buff was about to spawn, they counter invaded their own red jungle with 5 people, and Sword was almost already top lane, so he can't be part of the fight. And SKT were able to get a major lead from that. Burn Lissandra flash, kill multiple people, get first blood. And after that, they ganked mid again, and they killed Chobi again. So Chobi is 0-2 with no flash in a Lissandra versus Azir matchup. And pretty much the game is over there. Like, as the Lissandra side, you have to play well, and you have to kind of control the game and get ahead and out-pressure the Azir and use your early tempo and early priority well. But when you fall behind that far behind the Azir, like, game's pretty over. You already get outscaled. I think this was the single worst game I've ever seen from Chobi. This was probably his worst game of his life.
The fact that it happened in the playoff final as well is also going to haunt this guy, because now all these shitters. First of all, immediately, Loco, I already guarantee you loads of people like, see, I always said Faker was better than Chovy. It's like, that doesn't even make sense. Not least because you notice half the reason why Faker discussions are fairly worthless with most people is they don't even define, do they mean in all of history or do they mean right at this moment? And if they mean right at this moment, then half the time they've ever said anything about Faker, they were fucking full of shit anyway, because they were always meaning in history, really, right? Like, oh, he always does X, Y, and Z. So it's like, generally this season, for anyone who hasn't watched, Faker, even when they were winning, often was the guy who was willing to play supportive champions in the mid lane, was willing to allow... Basically, Faker himself was willing to be a pressure soak for other people. So this season hasn't really been...
You just mean Fionn.
Wow, what did he say?
I mean, regarding the SKT winning stuff and like Fionn.
Oh, obviously. Like, by the way, I've made fun of him so many times for that. In fact, actually, and I'm not even saying this is flame. I don't actually follow Fionn on Twitter for exactly that reason.
Really?
Because it just got boring seeing 700 tweets about Faker and like everything just being like. Because the problem he had is this, right? Mm-hmm. And I won't make this extended flame, but I'll give an honest opinion. The problem Fionn has is this. Is I genuinely think he thought part of his branding was that he's the guy who goes on about Faker and documents, what SK Telecom's done, etc. And what he doesn't understand is that allowed him to tip over into looking ridiculously biased. Mm-hmm. Because every time, here's the thing, it's absolutely fine, by the way, to repeat yourself if you're like a writer or a journalist or something, because oftentimes the field you study and whatever your expertise is, you end up writing about the same things again and again. So what you do when you write about the topic again is you try to see, right, can I either do like a better job of getting to the essence of this topic, or maybe I've learned something about the topic since then. Like, obviously, season 5 Faker is very different from season 3 Faker. Season 8 Faker is very different from season 3 Faker. So it is worth updating things. And if you're a writer, you inevitably will write about the same topics. The problem Fionn has is there were a lot of times he legitimately did just write the same article about SK Telecom, just like 6 months after he wrote the last one when they won a championship. And like that did, to me, get a bit boring. So I think as a person, his problem is like he went too hard on his strength. And in life in general, if you ever rely on your strength as a crutch, it becomes like a crutch. Like it can only take you as far as your strength can. And then you look like an idiot on everything that's not your strength. So Fionn's big problem in League of Legends is he's not like, you can just see from his writing, he's never even attempted this. He's not in any way like a guy who can sort of like on a deep tactical or mechanical level break the game down. He's about narratives. And about narratives, he's one of the best. But his problem is, I think he should do a better job of like pick a couple of analysts that he thinks are really experts, take some of their analysis and weave it in with the narrative. Because the narrative writing is very, very good. But as I implied, you can only read like 10 narrative articles about Faker. Eventually you need a bit of meat in there, or you need some other angle, because otherwise you just end up dancing. All you end up doing is just replacing whatever superlative. Like, oh, I used to say he was very dominant, so now I'll say he's a complete all-around master. So what are you going to go with on that, So like people like that, I am sort of calling out a bit. Like, I think it is a bit whack the way they over-focus on that. Because for me, the story of Faker in season 9 was that he literally got all these sick teammates, and so he thought, fuck it, why don't I just actually, when I have the chance to, yeah, I'll carry. When I don't, I'll set these guys up. I'll be a good team captain, probably shot call as well with Mata. Like, I'll be willing to let someone else run the team, essentially. But when he then got to the playoffs is when he went ham. Like in this final, obviously he was very good. He wasn't the best player, but he was very good for SK Telecom. Played all his lanes out very well. Team fought very well, like you'd hope. But put it this way, it's very telling, isn't it, Loco, that SK Telecom 3-0'd the final. And I don't know anyone who had Faker as the MVP. I think most people would have agreed it was Teddy.
So, well, I think
So that shows you it's a different Faker.
yeah, it is a different Faker, but that's like the thing though. Faker for all his career was the single best player on his team, or he was dragging corpses across to the finish line, especially like 2 years before and last year. So that's that's been Faker for 90% of his existence. He has been by far the best mid laner, by far the best player, and by far the best player on his team. And now that's changed, and a lot of people aren't with the times as much, and they're like, oh, Faker won SKT and Faker won Korea again, they must have been just as dominant as before, and that's an easy pitfall to fall into, and I think that's what a lot of people fall into due to negligence on like actually watching the matches and actually looking at the details, and also they do want to believe that you want to believe like Superman is still Superman, and
yeah, of course.
He's not getting carried by rest of Justice League.
No, that's actually the problem you've nailed right there, Loco, which is that it's also the biggest area you see this flaw, and you realize that people think this way, is if you ever get a legendary player who's playing for like a much worse team now, and that team ever wins games. Because people by default just go like, oh, he's back. The best is back. He's won the game. And it's like sometimes you tell them, like I used to have to say this about players I was a fan of, like especially when he was at the end. Mm-hmm. I was like, mate, just because Phoenix 1 wins a game, it's not special. Like, he's pretty washed at the point. Look at his fucking career. Like he had a legendary career, but that's in the past. Look at him now. He's
but
not
you
very
want
good
to
player.
believe.
Yeah, that's the problem. They just want to believe. And especially if it was like the best player, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
because the second the best player starts going ham, people go way too far. By the way, in CSGO, we have the worst example of this ever. Mm-hmm. Because what's mad about CSGO is because the scene in Counter-Strike was always incredibly top-heavy, and crucially, because of the way the circuit functions, you can be on a team that has a bad 6 months, or you individually can have a bad few months. What that allows, Loco, is it's not so like life and death, your career. Like if you start to have a bad career for half a year, you don't have to just retire. And all the companies aren't like, yeah, we don't want you, like get out. Like has happened to people in League of Legends. So as a result, because CSGO has like a circuit you can sort of like let breathe in that sense, that you can have go through your bad period. We actually have players who still play in CSGO who were the like greatest of all time candidates from the previous game, from 1.6. Mm-hmm. Like Forrest and Neil, these players still play the game. He doesn't play as much now. Like a guy called Marklov used to play the game still. Get right, these players were like the best 1.6 players. So the best example ever of this, by the way, is the player Forrest still plays. He plays for NIP still. But the problem is, NIP is like a borderline top 10 team in CSGO. And even on his team, he's not always the best player. And actually, if you look at his stats, he's nowhere near the top dogs now. Like the Simple, Nico, he's nowhere near their level. Mm-hmm. But what everyone does, no joke, Loco, is every time he has one really good game, they go so apeshit on social media. You would think he'd like won the MVP for the whole tournament, literally. Like the worst example ever was literally a couple of days ago. He had one series on LAN that was insane. Like his stats were amazing. And even though, by the way, it was against like, I'd guess like the 14th best team or something, like not a top team. So even though he just had this one game, they were all like, see, the greatest is back. He's still as good. And then what's hilarious is the next two games, he just played average as fuck and his team went out of the tournament. Like they actually lost in that phase of the tournament and went out of the group, which wasn't even that hard a group. So that is just an example of what you're talking about there, which is like, basically what they do is when the guy who was the greatest has another good game, they try to act like, let's forget all the stuff between then. Like the series is continuing. Like this is the sequel. Look, he's back. He's as good as ever. And the problem with that analysis is it's just mega fraudulent. Like what I was getting to with all of this, by the way, is there's no one credible actually thought Faker was better than Chovy over the whole split. Like literally everyone I can think of and know would have said Chovy's better than Faker. And if you wanted an interesting discussion, it was more just, are the Chinese mids better? Like that would have been a better discussion to have than whether it was Faker against Chovy. For me, it was more like Rookie and fucking Knight against Chovy. There's an interesting discussion if you want to have it. But obviously you have to watch LPL to know that one. So I get why plebs will go with the Faker versus Chovy angle. But for me, I'll agree in the final Faker played better. But Chovy is a better mid laner than Faker right now. It's just that, amazingly, after watching this playoffs, apparently Faker actually has a better team than Griffin, which is obviously in history, you'd never say that. You'd never be like, well, Faker's the worst player, but the other guy has the better team. So it just shows what an insane world we're in for SK Telecom now, with what a stacked super team they have.
Yeah. Teddy's a real gem. Teddy and Klid are actually insane players for SKT. They've never had junglers like this. And even though they've had Bang for such a long time, Bang is not like Teddy. Teddy is, how do I compare it? Bang is like a okay laner that's like a god tier team fighter, Teddy is like an AD carry that builds his own lead, and the way he team fights is he creates his own space too. Bang is very good when you set up for him. Bang is one of the best team fighting ADs with the setup, but Teddy makes his own lead in lane and also creates his own space in team fight too. Teddy is like very self-sufficient where Bang isn't. So yeah, SKT has never had an AD like this. Piglet in season 3 was kind of like this, but he wasn't there for a long time and also not on this kind of level. So, and also, yeah, Klid. I can't speak enough about Klid. SKT has never had a jungler like this. That I can say for sure. Bengi, like their longtime jungler, and then like Blank, Peanut, those are all like mediocre, like missing pieces. But Klid has been, how do I describe him? He is, who's he closest to that NA fans would probably know?
As in an NA player?
Yeah, as in a style-wise. I would say like maybe a very refined form of Dardoch, like incredibly aggressive but also smart. So Dardoch hasn't been very smart, so it's hard to say, but Klid is someone that I could see playing a different role and doing well. Like he's just mechanically really fucking clean, and he plays skirmishes really well, but he's also really smart. Let's say Dardoch, but Xmithy got to tell Dardoch where to go from his ear. Like that's how I would describe it.
You might be overrating the cerebral aspect a little bit there. Like, I first of all, like mechanically, he is very sick. But then, first of all, another factor about him in this team is he definitely benefits from being on this particular team. Because the thing about Klid is he doesn't try to be the guy. Like, you know, earlier in the split, Tarzan was like, I can just play any champion in any matchup at any time and you can't do anything against me. No, Klid is just like, give me one of these 3 champions. Give me Lee Sin, fucking Jarvan or Rek'Sai, and that's all I need. And because he's on this team, this is the benefit of, this is why super teams, if they ever could have worked, would be a genius concept, is because the great thing about a super team is if you have all these superstar players who used to be the best player on their team, odds are they all have very good champion pools. So when you combine 4 or 5 super deep champion pools, the amount of flexing that's possible becomes insane, as you see with G2. The amount of picks you can hide, like you trick someone in the draft so that they forget, oh, I forgot about that guy, and then he gets his pick, you know. Like for me, Klid is one of the players where at the moment, people don't tend to go super ham on jungle bans unless you have like a super limited pool or you have like one thing that you play. So we saw in the TLTSM final, they know that Rek'Sai is an amazing champion for Acadian, but they were like, you know what, we'll live with that. Like, we'll just give him that and say that's fine. I think Klid gets that treatment when he's in SK Telecom though. Like he kind of just gets his junglers basically. He's never really in like threat in that sense. Now I get why Griffin did that, because if you ask me what one of the big edges in this series should be, it should have been Tarzan against Klid. But I have to say, the 2 people who shit the bed the hardest in this final is fucking Chovy and Tarzan.
Wow, you're gonna blame Tarzan? I'm super curious why.
Come on, man. Like, look in this game. Like, if you look any of the mid game here and you paused it and you said to someone, by the way, everyone considers this jungler a genius. Like, he's supposed to have the best pathing, the best understanding of the game. You don't see that at any end of the game. Like, as soon as they start losing, he's irrelevant. He doesn't do anything.
I think Tarzan did so well regarding being there for the objectives and actually outsmiting it away from Klid and kept it.
That's all right, sure, but there's more to jungling than just that, though.
Yeah, there is more to jungling and there is more to pathing. It's just the way they drafted hurt Tarzan so much. So in game 1 and 3, where they're drafting to bust open bot lane, right? It was so obvious what Klid has to do as Rek'Sai. Make sure I'm there for the dive. They picked an Elise. They picked an Olaf. They're gonna be trying to dive bot lane with Talia Pantheon. If all I have to do is make sure I'm there and I can protect for the dive, then that's job well done. And Tarzan is just given those tools. Like, I have a Talia Pantheon. I have to make sure they get ahead. I have to make sure I dive this. So I feel like he was just left in a very, very awkward spot, and he tried his best to get it done. But Klid was very, very cerebral about it and made sure he counter-ganked every single time. So yes, like Klid kind of neutralized Tarzan, but the game plan from Griffin was god-awful. Like, I'm not sure with that game plan if any team could have beaten SKT. Like, that's
also the bad part, isn't it? Because like there's an exact, like, think about who I picked as my MVP, right? I said if Griffin wins, Tarzan will be the MVP because logically, if he's the best player in the world and he's your jungler, then you want him to go off. And if he goes off, the whole team will be carried. That's the whole concept. In fact, I've been one of the people, by the way, where I never bought, go back to the earliest episodes, you'll see this. I never was one of these people who bought this angle of like, oh my God, Griffin is these 5 super rookies. So we're all in the, it's like, no, they're not. Like they have a couple of really amazing players. They have a couple who are pretty good. And then they have Sword. That's basically the way their team is. And when everything looked great in the draft and early in the split, yeah, it looked fucking amazing. They couldn't be beaten. But you already starting to see some cracks start to appear. You saw some roles, like you saw some games where it's like, is Viper actually that good? He's pretty good, but he's probably not on the level of depth, etc. Teddy, like these players are better. You start to see over the split. Well, one of the factors about this is like what I said at the beginning of this segment, is like if you really believed your team was better, you'd never make Tarzan have to play like this in 2 and 3 games. The whole point of why he was a genius was he had free reign. He looked like the guy where, I don't know what the shot calling setup in their team is, but his particular part of the game, he looks like he had complete control over what he wanted to do in the past in Griffin. That's why the guy's a fucking genius.
I mean, we can go to game 3. Like game 3 was, as we're alluding to, it's Griffin opting into Talia Pantheon again after it didn't work. Like, if you have a trick play and your trick play doesn't work the first time, if you try to do it again to me, then I'm going to be even better prepared for it because I know how to counter it the first time. So this time when they're banning Tahm Kench Morgana and going into Talia Pantheon, they early picked the Braum Israel. They're like, okay, I fucking dare you. I fucking dare you. Do it again. Like, do it again. It didn't work the first time. It's not going to work the second time. I dare you. And they did it again and it didn't fucking work. Like, I really didn't understand the prep coming in from Griffin. I get the sentiment that they knew that they were the worst team fighting team and they couldn't beat SKT in a standard 5v5 like a normal League of Legends game.
Which is a big deal. Remember, Griffin was the best team fighting team earlier this year. Of course, that's what they were legendary for. For anyone who doesn't know, they either just beat you straight up in the game and you were like, well, I couldn't do anything there. And everyone was like, you can't get in the game when Tarzan plays. Or if they ever got behind, they just out-team fought you. That was Griffin's identity. So that does show, by the way, that when someone loses faith in their own strength, they have nothing. It's like a house of cards at that point in time. You're not nothing left.
I don't want to rubber band and call Griffin's coaching staff shit because I mean they put together 5 rookies.
Come on, this
and
draft was fucking shit.
They got all the way to this point, but the draft and the prep was absolute fucking garbage. I just don't understand. They mind fucked themselves from scrims, and something must have happened internally like regarding scrims. Like SKT must have been so fucking dominant because all the Korean coaches and all the Korean player representative picked SKT. Like the scrim must have been like. I don't know how bad it was where Griffin is like starting to self-doubt themselves. Like you finish first in the season, like SKT doesn't look that great in the King Zone match, and then like somehow like you're doubting yourself. Like imagine TL suddenly not playing towards bot side and they're like, we're gonna play exclusively towards top side. We feel like we can't beat TSM from bot side. Like it's like what? That's been your core identity for the entire split and you're gonna switch it up all of a sudden. Like it's and what the fuck, like Griffin, this has been your core identity for your entire split and you're gonna switch up like on the one series where it matters the most. It was mind-blowing. It wasn't a great finals. As much as hype it got, it wasn't a great finals.
I mean, I'm actually going to probably do my own separate video on this topic. It's something I've alluded to. It's one of the reasons I said, actually, even though I picked Griffin, I thought it was Griffin 3-2, is I hate the fucking format of the playoffs in LCK. I think it's a really bad format because of 2 factors. One, the team who goes straight to the final, look how many times it's made them like weaker than they were supposed to be on paper. Because think about it, you have no one to scrim. Everyone else, once they go out of the tournament, stops playing League of Legends for a while. Or if they play it, you have to have connections with them to get a scrim off them. Like, the team who comes in from the second place match, whether they were just only in that match or 2 matches earlier, has played a whole match, has had people to scrim against before then, doesn't need to scrim now because they play the very next week. And then thirdly, has way more recent official games in the meta. Like, there's actually a lot of disadvantages to going straight to that final. I'm not a fan of it. I think, and also the last part as well is even if you were the big favourite, I think it's good to have played matches like for the viewers. Like think about an SK Telecom's old classic runs. It'd be rubbish if they were just sat in the final waiting for someone. The fact that they had to go through all those opponents, you see them level up, you see where they are. Also, you would have already been able to see from a whatever potential semi-final if Griffin really was in trouble. Whereas like right now, that's probably the toughest part. Is I can speculate that they should have just played straight up. But maybe they're right. Maybe whatever scrims they played, probably against like fucking teams that aren't even good. Like maybe they had to play. I would even guess Loco. They probably scrimmed some of the teams in promotion because they're some of the teams that are still around, still active, you know. So if they played a few scrims against them and were like, oh, it's not working, we're going to get wrecked. They might have just completely wrecked their whole game plan, but maybe they were wrong, or maybe they were right, and maybe we just didn't see them play, so we don't know that they were way weaker. Could also be that.
I think historically it's been the format for Korea, and I'd be surprised if it changed. It's been this format for years. Like, not just League of Legends, I mean StarCraft days also. This has been...
That's where you're wrong. It was only that in the team league of StarCraft.
Pro team.
Yeah, but the problem is, for the individual leagues, they just used to have a normal bracket. That's why it tilts me that they've gone to this far. I know why they've done it. It's because, remember, Korea never was a league. OGN Champions was a tournament. And the problem is, when Riot came along and told them, listen, for everyone who's a fucking moron out there and believes TSM interviews, I know that officially Kesper claimed they wanted to go to a league. Do you have any idea how the Mafia works? The guy who's got a fucking shop and the Mafia comes around every week, hey, have you got out that money so we can keep protecting your shop? He doesn't go like, hello everyone in the shop, I am now paying my Mafia bribe so that he does not smash my shop up. I am very scared. No, he lies and goes, yes, pleasure to do business with you, sir, and gives him the protection money and just has his shop. So in the same sense, yes, Korea and OGN aren't going to admit that they're being forced by Riot, but if you have half a fucking brain, or unlike you guys, like me, are in the industry and are a motherfucking legend who can ask people these questions, you find out what really happened. So anyway, when they were made to go to a league format like the LCS, etc., the problem is that's when they chose this playoff format. And I know why they choose it. It's because there are some upsides for the broadcast. Like for the actual event, this is a better broadcast local because on the one hand, you know exactly how many games you need. You never have like 4 quarterfinals to get out the way. You've got like one match, then one match, then one match. So it's very nice for the scheduling, for booking the stadium. That's all great. And then secondly, this format does try to make it seem like you've got to try every game in the regular split because where you finish is where you go in the playoffs. So that, on paper, that all sounds great. It's just personally, I think it's not a very good playoff. Like whenever you see this approach, Korean playoffs haven't been very good in the LCK era. There haven't been that many great series.
Well, I think generally, like, SKT has loved this approach because whenever they were the ones at top, I think they generally have won every single time. I'm trying to think when they lost, like, if it was...
Oh, they have. They've won all of them.
They won all every time they're standing first, and this is a format that's fucked Griffin because this is the second time they finished first, and then they got beat by the people coming up, so... Oof. So, moving on to kind of Griffin, do you think Griffin are chokers now then? Do you think they're kind of this is something that's going to sit with the players for a while because it's the second time it's happened in the finals?
It's like I say, the really telling thing for me isn't even how badly they played. It's like what their choices imply about how they think their level is. That's the really worrying part. Because, like I said, I was already someone who was skeptical of parts of Griffin. It's just I thought to myself, like, well, they're still the best team. And so as long as they adapt to this new meta, they don't have to be as good. Like, it was very unlikely once the carry top meta came around that they were going to be as good as they were early in the split. But they still could have been the best team. They still could have been a very, very good team and potentially won LCK. So the real question for me, is what the psychological, like, trauma of this fucking final is. Because after this final... I'd have a hard time with some of these players, like trusting my teammates. I would think like everything's just fucking done, isn't it? It's over for us.
All right. Thank you, chat, for correcting me. So apparently Griffin didn't finish first last year. They were second. They still lost in the finals. You guys knew what I meant.
Oh, that's right. Yes, they beat Afrika, sure.
And then,
whatever.
Same difference. But the thing is, regarding not trusting people, I'm kind of curious where Chobi's at. Because Chobi mentally, I think, is probably the most damage due to what happened in game 2 and then the game finishing like that in game 3, because if they're losing trust in people, it's Chobi, Tarzan losing trust in bot lane or top lane, right? So that's where I kind of see like kind of the team breaking apart, and if they let go of anyone, it would either be letting go of Sword or letting go of Viper. And I'm like, Viper is you still are not going to find a better AD than Viper, and where do you upgrade from here? So if they do lose trust, like, what do you think it looks like? What do you think the future of the team looks like?
Well, that's the interesting thing. Like, obviously, bearing in mind how good they were this split, I'm assuming they take the same team into summer. But that's actually where what I'm interested for in the future is. I don't know if I don't know if other Koreans would actually want to join Griffin the org, because the org has no track record at all, has no like legendary history or whatever. The reason you want to join Griffin is because their team's so insane and their players are so insane. So it would really probably depend what sort of pull, like Perks-esque pull they have within the community, because there are tons of sick Korean players out there. Like obviously the LPL has loads of them, but I actually do think at this point in time you should probably at least consider certain. Like obviously now that they didn't win LCK, now you should look at potentially upgrading for Sword and getting a different player. Because even though I agree with you, he didn't actually play badly in this final. He was okay. Like he was better than expected. The second that we did switch the meta, he was immediately clearly a problem, because he's someone I used to flame even when he was on Sion. But I used to do it like this. It was like, I actually don't think he's a good player, but fuck, he is somehow playing this champion well, and he does somehow get, he does his job, yeah.
I thought he was one of the best top laners in the world during the Sion Urgot era. During that patch and during that era, I thought he was one of the best. His Sion was insane. You can't take credit away from his Sion.
I don't know about that. I feel like when a player's like that, you should use this distinction. You should say he's one of the best Scions. He's not one of the best top laners. Because, like he didn't have a lot of depth in what he could do. What he did, he was very good at. But then again, there's the other thing to mention. I'll tell you why I'm not going to accept that. The reason why I won't accept that makes you one of the best top laners is because by that logic, right, let's say I was doing a team and I took him first. Oh, well, I'll take Sword as my top laner. You can't build a team around Sword. He's someone you build around other people. So what he did only activated other people. The difference is if you're actually the best at your role, I use the same logic as like the NFL or whatever. If I'm the best at a role that's not like the most obvious role, well, then the team runs around me. That's how it works. That's how you know I'm the best. So my team doesn't have to win for me to be the best, but you can see from where the team plays that's me. So like the problem with him is, mate, if he was playing for a Freaker, you'd never hear of him, would you? He'd just be an okay player. No one would give a fuck about this guy.
So who was your biggest disappointment on Griffin? You said Tarzan. Do you still think it's Tarzan?
I mean, I kind of agree with you when I think about it. Like, there's not really... He was a bit shackled on what he could have done in these games, but it definitely, like, put it this way, the narrative around him, it does kill a lot of that. Like, come on, you're telling me there's no edges that you could have found in this game. There was no, like, intelligent path you could have taken. There was no better approach to ganking you could have had. Because I feel like also Griffin misexecuted a lot of shit. Like, they just looked shook as fuck in this final, mate.
I'd have to go back and check to see if there were a little bit more things that Tarzan could have done. It's just, I thought their game plan was so one-dimensional in what they had to accomplish, and they failed to accomplish in that. For me, like, the biggest chokers are the coaching staff, and I would say Viper.
Oh, that's one thing I hate as well, by the way, is just as an aside, a pet peeve I have in esports is when someone has like, here's the thing, Griffin isn't a super team, but if you saw the fact that they were winning every game earlier this split, at one point in time, not only did they win every game, but they had all these weird picks that they kept using, even though no one else at the time was doing like, funnel or whatever the fuck. They had all these like bizarre picks that were reminiscent of that era. And so at that time, everyone was doing that classic thing they do where like, oh, CV Max, he's a genius. This guy just knows the draft like no one else does. It's like, if I'm a fucking chef, right, and we're both going to cook a meal, Loco, and we're going to be judged on it. It's like a food competition. And all I have as my ingredients is a can of baked beans and a dead fish's head. I'm going to have to be a fucking god to even get something like edible out of that. If the other guy has a fully stocked kitchen with like, rosemary, thyme, got mint, like he's got every fucking ingredient in the world. And at the end, he makes like a pretty good soup. And you're like, this guy's a fucking genius. He just knows food. It's like, no, he had every ingredient. Like, he had every possible option of which way to go, how to add it. That's what he had with that team early on. Well, you know what? When you actually see the real value of a coach is when you have to make tough decisions that the coach has to make. Well, if you look at this series here, what a fucking overrated coach. I won't say a bad coach because I doubt you can be this good with a team if you're bad. But like the idea that he let his own players believe they were beaten before they even played a fucking game, that he went back like like the Bible says, like a dog returns to its own sick. That's how fucking CV Max came back to the Game 3 draft that made me sick, motherfucker. And then the angle that like you literally took your best player, who I've told everyone the whole time is the jungler, not the mid laner, and you put fucking shackles on how he played the game. You don't even know how your win conditions are. Like, the idea... If there's one thing I hate in all games, it's taking the best player's strength and using it to cover the worst player's weakness. You know, when I gave that example of I have this team play concept that it's about like covering each other's weaknesses. It's not about using your strength to cover the weakness, though. If you use the best player's strength and waste it, now you just become average. That's what it's a band-aid. Like you want to have like someone else's strength just coincidentally happens to cover someone else's weakness. That's where you get a great mixture. So like this actually shook a lot of my faith in that guy as a coach, mate. Like this is fucking whack.
Do you remember earlier in the season when Griffin was undefeated and we had a show with Ashley, and then like the talk around Griffin was, this team is fucking unbeatable. This team might be the greatest Korean team ever.
Of course.
They're better than the Chinese team. Remember what I said? Like, let's give credit where credit is due, but let's wait. Like, even if Griffin wins the season undefeated, they still haven't dented SKT's legacy. Like, until like they go international and they do something, like you cannot talk about this team this way. Like, it's all hype. Like, they're great now, they're great in the meta, but it's all hype, and they really need to show it. I was so fucking spot on. Like, they're not going to they still have not been to a single international tournament. They still have not won an official LCK season yet. They have been one of the greatest regular split teams, but they still have so little to show for that. Like, they still have so little to show, like, in terms of, like, legacy as a team. Like, Griffin's not even going to crack top 5 for the greatest LCK teams of all time. Not even greatest teams in the world, like top 5 for greatest LCK teams, like at this point. Like, they're still not going to crack that. So I thought the hype was ridiculous. And yeah, like hype is still...
Wait a minute. No, I'm calling you out on this. The hype was ridiculous.
Yeah, I thought the hype was ridiculous.
Here's the thing. I don't... Maybe people were, but like I never said they were the greatest team ever or whatever. Like, obviously you have to also... The key thing to know, by the way, is any greatest list... Even though idiots do go way too far on like how many championships you have, the point is when you talk about greatest ever, you probably got to have some championships. Like let's say Faker had never played for SK Telecom and he'd never won LCK. He could have still been the greatest ever, but he'd have had to have like an even more insane career probably to overcome the gap in people's brain that someone else would have had 4 championships or a world champion, you know, like to overcome that. So I agree on that level. You have to actually do it. It doesn't matter how good the potential is. But the actual trajectory did look like that. Like, if you go, bear in mind, last split was their rookie split, and they literally almost won the finals. And that was against an all-star, like, veteran team in Katie Rolster. Then this split, their initial, like, if you go on, off the top of my head, I'm going to say, like, the first 8 weeks of LCK. Holy shit, that trajectory was insane. That was, for anyone who doesn't know, that was better than the trajectory SK Telecom came into the game with Faker. That was better than the trajectory Samsung White, etc. had. That was better. Like, they actually, if you were doing like, okay, I'll give you an example. When they do the crowdfunding for the international every year, you know, they do that like compendium and they make the money. They always do like a graph to show like, are they ahead of where they were last year? Are they behind? Like, Griffin would have been the top line. They would have been higher than everyone and going higher up, right? But I agree with you. Just like King's Own Dragon X last spring, who also had an amazing trajectory, if you remember, they just never completed it. They dropped off at the end. So I have to say, one of the factors for Griffin that I do think happened is look at the 2 metas that they were the best in. They came around in the funnel meta, and then after that, and even after the funnel meta ended, they still had all those weird picks they could run in bot lane, for example. And then they came around in this really weird meta at the beginning of the split, where it was just Urgot, fucking Aatrox, and I can't remember what the third one was in the top lane. That was all you played top lane. So as a result, basically, at those 2 metas, they were gods. The problem is when we moved to more of a standard meta, they've just fallen apart. Now, I don't think it's over, Loco. I still think they could come back and be the best team next split.
I don't think it's over.
They have to do something drastic. Like, they maybe did. The problem is I think the circumstances made them look too good, as it were, you know.
I don't think it's over for Griffin. I don't think they need to roster change right away. I would like to see a few roster changes, maybe subs picked up, but I just thought it was so fucking ridiculous, like the hype behind them. Just the hype train was beyond what it should be in. And also, one thing I didn't say, now that I think about it, that I really should have said back then, is the context of the teams that Griffin's competing against is really different than normally what is expected out of LCK. Like, normally you have a lot of top tier teams that are very veteran in LCK, but so many of the teams shuffle their decks. Genji, KT, Kingdom actually came up later. Genji, KT, SKT were struggling a little bit early. There were so many teams that were in disarray. Like, Griffin were king of the... Like, being the best in LCK had a different kind of meaning.
When they were the absolute best in LCK was when Sandbox was the clear second best, who at the end were a joke, by the way. Mm-hmm. And then they were still on number one when SK Telecom was finally coming up and joined them. So I would agree. By the way, I would actually say that with the exception of maybe like the first ever split when they went to LCK, when it was the one where like CJ finished fucking third, I think this was one of the worst LCK splits I've ever seen for like strength of the top teams, because that's actually the whole reason why I think people still don't get it as to why I made that bet with Ashley. Is because, you know, I had a very good chance of winning that bet, because think of the teams that didn't even get relevant. Afrika, Gen G, KT Rolster. All I needed was like two of these teams to be good, Loco, and I would have probably won the bet. So, like, that's the whole reason why I actually thought, fucking hell, this could be an amazing split. Because remember, even though they ended up being weak, teams like KT still looked like they should be super strong. Like, we were coming in with solo lane game. This should have been amazing. So I agree. Like, if you look at who they beat, that's one of the things you can take away from them. It's like their competition was kind of fucking whack for most of the split.
I just still think they got over romanticized, overhyped, and I want to see like kind of Griffin from a distance and from a length. Like, I want to see this team over the course of a year, over a course of 2 years, before like people start putting them with like SKT, like Samsung, KT. Like, these teams have been like history of greatness. Like,
one thing I'll say is this though, one thing you do have to give them credit for is, unlike teams like something like Rocks, Tigers, etc., those teams at least have some known quantities in them when they become number one. This team basically are nobodies, but they all did it together. So that part's cool. I get why people get like drawn into the hype. Like, it would be awesome. But that's also, by the way, why it's less likely that that team becomes the best ever. Because as I've alluded to many times, what are the odds these are all five godlike players who are going to play for 5 more years? No, they're probably not. Like, I imagine in a year or two, a couple of them are on middle to bottom teams. Maybe some of them are on different teams. Like, maybe Chovy plays for fucking KT Roaster when BDD leaves. I don't know. You know, like, they will disperse eventually. So the real thing for me is like that discussion we had with Ashley is like, who actually ends up being a really good player from this team? And I think what you've seen as the split began to end was that some of the players did have flaws and weren't quite as good as people made out. Because that was also that's the one part of the hype I'm with you on. Is I hated that hype of like, they're all 5 super sick players. It's like, oh, fucking calm down. No. Like, do you think Korea's that dumb that they didn't find any of these players in solo queue? Of course not. Like, what happened was people already were aware of Tarzan. I'm sure some people knew who Chovy was. It's just that the others, they hadn't played in this team, so no one knew they could be this good.
Yeah, Chovy, Tarzan, I think, will be evergreen players, and they'll either be great with Griffin, or if Griffin's a shithole, they'll go to other teams and be great with them. Like, Chovy, Tarzan, I can see doing well on pretty much any other team.
Here's the thing, though. The redemption arc is obviously set up, though, Loco, because you still have another split before Worlds anyway. Winning the summer split does get you the number 1 seed. It's still more important. And you've just had this really embarrassing playoff series. Like, you would hope they never do this again. Like, next time, even if things are going badly, you never do like a panic move like this in 2 games. And then also, I actually think the league, some of the teams will make changes they need to, and the split will be stronger in summer. So here's the difference. If Griffin can come back and they can win summer, that can actually fix all the problems, basically. It's a tough one, though. It's going to be tough to do it.
Summer will be much harder than spring. I can't imagine teams like KT and Gen G just sitting there like, oh, well, spring was bad. I guess if we just believe in our roster a little bit more, if our friendship is a little bit better, like, we just need a little bit more time and we'll be great in summer. I don't think KT will have that approach. I don't think Gen G will have that approach.
No, especially because here's the thing people don't seem to realize about Korean teams is, yes, it makes perfect sense why, like, you know, BBQ Olivers or Jinair can't get good players, because they are considered like bottom of the tier. No one wants to play for them, blah, 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 no money. But it's not like Gen G and KT have to sign big free agents. In Korea, there are always good prospects in solo queue, just no one's properly tried out officially. So all it's going to take is one of those 3 teams, Afrika, KT, Gen G. One of those teams is going to find some new rookie player who's going to be really good. It's going to turn their franchise around. I don't know who it'll be, but I guarantee one of them does it at least.
Yeah, I mean,
the odds are just there.
Compared to NA, like teams like CLG and 100 Deep, the only way they can recover for summer is if they buy out imports somehow. 100 Thieves can't even do that because they are already running double imports and their imports are really good. Like, for a team like CLG, like, the only way they can improve is if they buy like a big import. Not like that in Korea. They can do it with a solo queue player. They can do it with a challenger level player. Like, they can get it done. So Yeah, because some are going to be much, much, much more rougher than
one thing I think is interesting though is let's move this trajectory to talking about MSI and SK Telecom's chances, because one of the things I find really interesting about this specific context of who's going to MSI at the moment is that SK Telecom is actually going to be in a very weird position stylistically, because the two teams that are going to MSI who favour more of a late game style are Team Liquid and SK Telecom. Now, admittedly, SK Telecom has amazing players, so they're not going to be as many weaknesses as Team Liquid sure does. But you look at the other teams, so like G2 is a fucking amazing snowball team. We all know that. And they've also shown insane flexibility. They're doing comps nobody else runs. I think that actually puts G2 in a very nice position to actually potentially succeed against an SK Telecom. If you look at the two Chinese teams that are available, these are teams that have a bunch of really skilled players. So they, like IG, I think actually has just as good a team as SK Telecom almost. Like they have a very, very strong team. Jingdong has is a very unknown team. People don't know those players and how they're going to play. So like there are a lot of dangers for SK Telecom at this tournament, because if anyone knows anything about Korean teams typically, the one thing they hate to do is play stuff that they've never played before or play things that are outside of their comfort zone. They want to play the game that they've prepped for. So I personally, I'm not going to go as far as you guys where you said like you had G2 number one. I would still put SK Telecom like a small favourite, but I think this is like a very precarious tournament for them.
So what SKT definitely is a more late game focused team than G2 or the LPL teams, but uniquely for this MSI, almost all the teams are going to be in Korea or China during the kind of the lead up to Vietnam to beat Jetlag and also to boot camp. So they're all going to get to scrim each other. And as Grabs, who was on our last episode, talked about, they'll learn from each other. If SKT is getting rolled over by LPL teams and G2 in these scrims due to early game strategies, I think they'll also adjust, and I think they can be a very good early game team. They have the players to do it. Why I prefer G2 is G2 has just shown so much excellence in the early game and so much variety, and it's going to be curious how much SKT is going to get to see that during their practice. And I feel like it's really weird to say, but I feel like it's more beneficial for G2 to not scrim SKT than it is for them to scrim them. I think SKT has so much more to take away from G2 than G2 does from SKT in just terms of the playstyle, because SKT is so standard in how they play. They're a very typical Korean team, and they play very typically the meta, where G2 is a lot more special, and you lose a lot of your specialness, like showing it off to people.
I really hope at this tournament that G2 does some of those like unusual flexes or tries some like non-meta stuff, because I actually think with their team, they've got one of the few teams that has such an insanely high skill level they can pull it off. And if you could pull that off against a Korean team, I guarantee it gives you a psychological edge. Like Korean teams don't want to play against some comp they've never played. Like, what the fuck, that's going in the top lane instead of, like, they don't want to play in that scenario. Like, that's actually a really good way to get under their skin, in my opinion.
If they played in scrims though, like that takes away like the surprise factor, and I feel like G2 is gonna scrim SKT and show some of their hand.
That was always what, this is actually something behind the scenes me and Monty have discussed many, many times before, is that was always the big flaw of the way the league setup works in League of Legends, is that because Koreans already not only are the best, but have the best like practice environment, basically, the reason you always have to scrim the Koreans when you do your Korean bootcamp before Worlds is because it just levels you up. It gives you a better chance to be a better team yourself, right? So in the short term, I agree with that benefit. But in a world in which you are potentially as good as the Koreans, I think you're 100% right, by the way. The last thing you want to do is go and play them like 50 times. And TSM fucking know this, because CSM did it every single year. This is one of the reasons, by the way, guys, in case you don't know, as to why NA famously had those shit second weeks. Because what would happen was every other team is scrimming, trying to adapt to what went wrong in week one or what strengths the opponent showed. And so NA literally would just end up getting downloaded by SK Telecom, Samsung. And by the second week, it was like, it's not even about player strength anymore. Like, this team just is comfortable playing you. They're going to beat you.
So, yeah, going to be interesting to see where it goes. I do think the one super interesting matchup that's going to happen is if G2 and SKT play each other, the AD carry difference. As much respect I have for Perkz, Teddy's going to be one of the best AD carries in the tournament, and I think Perkz will be one of the worst AD carries or one of the worst bot lane players out of the major regions. I think he'll be better than all the minor region AD carries, but that's a really big that's the biggest difference between G2 and SKT.
I actually think one topic I wanted to ask you about though is, so if people think of SK Telecom history, yes, it is actually a very famous hallmark of SK Telecom teams over the last few years to be like really good late game, really good setting up for macro, like fight around objectives. Like people understand that as a strength, but that's actually not at all. If you think of all the great Mata teams, how they tended to play, Samsung White, Katie Ralston, these were like snowball the game teams. Like that was Mata's style. In fact, I always used to say, this is one of those areas where people don't realize, like, analyzing the game isn't always about like game knowledge. It's about things like looking for what the pattern is or looking for what seems unusual, which is why, even though I don't claim to be an expert about League of Legends, like the actual game, like if I played it, I'd be terrible. I actually do think on the esports level, I can analyze sometimes a way that people can't, just because I have a lot of experience from watching like a bazillion games of Brood War and CSGO and Quake, all these other games that show you things about how competitive stylistic matchups work. And one factor that I always found was really overrated was Mata is one of the best shot callers, but his flaw is identically built into his strength, which is in all those teams I was talking about, they used to smash the early game. People would always be like, they either just roll the early game or they troll. And it's like, no, they're not. There's no trolling. Like the trolling that you're talking about is the same thing. He's trying to smash the game still. He's trying to push every edge to the maximum. And if it works, you take over the whole game and everyone calls you a genius. And if you go too far and you overchase for a kill or you give up a lead, people go, oh, you just trolled. It's like, no, that's the same approach. Just the result is different. So I'm just interested that like Mata has basically taken on a totally different style of team at this point in time. I think it's quite impressive, actually. He's different type of captain.
I just think he got overpowered. I think on RNG, no one can say no to Mata. No one, not even the coaching staff. Maybe the owner is the only person that can say no to Mata, but I feel like on RNG, like people fucking loved Mata, and Mata got to do whatever the fuck he wanted, and like he got to be whoever he wanted, and the team was whatever the team he wanted it to be. Same thing for KT. I think Mata was definitely the biggest voice in KT. I feel like there were some struggles earlier regarding Smeb and Mata and being a bot side team or a top side team, and Mata won out, and Mata got exactly what he wanted, and the team came with a lot of Mata's flaw. And I think on SKT, there's actually a difference. I actually think the power struggle is a little bit more evened out, and it's a little bit more towards the coaching staff and what they want overall as a team. And if I think any player on SKT who has the biggest voice, I would imagine it's Faker. So I just think more so than Mata actively changing on his own, Mata was just put in a situation where I'm not the biggest voice anymore. Like, I don't rule this team. Like, I can't just get what I want, and I actually have to learn, and I actually have to compromise. And I think that's kind of what happened with SKT.
Still a sick player, though.
Yeah, still a sick player, but he leveled up by not just getting to do whatever he wanted all the time.
The only thing is, though, a quick side point, just from a narrative world, though, the one area Mata has fucked up is that by playing with Faker, he can now never catch Faker as the GOAT because he's just boosting Faker to more titles. So the problem is, when they win titles now, no one's going to go, oh, Mata was the best ever. They're just going to go more for Faker, and his pile just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. He needed to do it the other way. That's why, actually, even though it's gone to shit, it looks terrible now, I actually have insane respect for Smeb for turning down that SKT offer a few years back, where he was literally like, I would rather beat SK Telecom. That's a fucking sick mentality. Like, I know why Mata in this scenario did. Like, he's towards the end of his career, you know, and SK Telecom was actually shit when he joined it now. But there is something cool about that mentality, because I actually believe personally, every championship you win without playing with the best player is like, you get way more credit. You're like the fucking samurai when you did it the hard way.
Credit, sure, like you get more credit, you get more coolness points, like we'll talk about them in a high way. Sure. Like Smeb, oh, you were so honorable, like not going to SKT and like wanting to beat them. But at the end of the day, it's the trophies and the dollars that matters the most. And if you want the trophies and the dollars,
it doesn't. No,
I would trade every.
That statement is bullshit.
No,
go on, tell me.
I would. What is it? If I could have an additional LCK win, if I could have an additional LCS trophy, but I don't get as much credit, or it wasn't on me and someone else carried me, I'd be more than okay. I think it's way more important to have the trophies.
Oh, that sucks. That fucking sucks. Because here's the thing, you know what, Loco? Is if you did that, I could say to you, like, you weren't even one of the best players on that team. You got carried, you know, you just had a good meta.
You can say that, but what does...
No, here's the difference, though. Deep down, I guarantee you would get triggered if I did that. deep down you'd be going, like, to say, I'll give you the perfect example. So I was talking about this on my EU podcast. So a couple of years ago, it was a few years ago now, it was in like season 5, was when Reckless did, or maybe it's season 6, Reckless did an AMA on Reddit, and someone asked him about Forgiven, right? Yeah. And he was basically a bit salty about Forgiven. Like, he sort of implied, like, oh, I don't think he plays AD carry correctly. But then he basically did say, but he is a very, very good player. Now, the reason why that's very significant, Loco, is there was a different incident happened with Reckless where Freeze tried to talk shit to Reckless. Now, when Freeze talked shit to Reckless literally just went the route you're talking about. He was like, he just took a picture of his like Gamepedia of all his trophies, and he was like, you know, like, there's the difference between me and you, basically. Now, that's like a really whack way to argue, because the point is, if you actually thought you were better, you wouldn't even need to bring up the championships. You go, listen, mate, forget the championship. I'm just better than you. Like, I was a better player. The point is, Reckless knows he can't say that to Forgiven. I know every fan in the chat now is like, what are you talking about? Reckless has all those championships. Let me know when Forgiven played with Expeke and Soaz and fucking Hooney and Yellows. He didn't. He never played with them. So the point is, I can go to Reckless and I can get under this guy's skin tomorrow by pointing out he was never the best player on the teams that won. He had some of the greatest players of all time. So if I want to make the case between Forgiven and Reckless, who was better, just in terms of individual play, you can make that argument. You can have an interesting shadow box, and Reckless himself has to basically acknowledge it's a discussion. So the point I'm making is this. I think actually it's way more for your legacy to be considered a great player than it is to win the championship if you're not a great player. Like, that's actually an aspect that's overrated as fuck. I know in the modern day, this is what has ruined the NBA, by the way.
Ring chasing.
Everyone thinks it's about getting the championship, but they don't realize, like, what Kevin Durant will never understand is that he did actually help his career a bit by winning these championships. But dude, think about the way people talk about him. He didn't even boost his stock that much by winning 2 finals MVPs. Like, if he'd have won even once with that Thunder team, he would be a legend forever. He would be like an all-time great player. Like, I actually think it's whack as fuck, this whole mentality of like, but I won the championship. It's like, if you won the championship as like the 4th best player, you basically didn't win the championship. You helped someone else win the championship.
Damn, I actually think, what is it? It's kind of the generational difference between us, where I'm a millennial and you're kind of a Gen X, you're a Gen Xer, where I think the game we're playing is how many rings can you get? Like, how much rings can you get? How much money can you, stock up? And the best way to do that is win championships. And
yeah, but that also promotes like what I think is actually a very negative thing for the scene, which is ring chasing, which is trying to stack teams all the time. I think there's something really cool about a guy. I'll give you the best example ever, right? As an NBA example, I'd give you the best example would be Dirk Nowitzki, right? Because he is one of the best players to ever play in the NBA. Like, if I had to pick him, I'd maybe put him like top 50 all time. He's a very, very good player. And he only won 1 championship. He had a couple more chances that he maybe could have won 2 or 3, depending on like some of the rosters and the injuries they had in his career. But like, he only won the 1 championship. But the reason why, Loco, no one says, well, he can't be considered one of the best players ever, is because, first of all, the 1 championship he won, he fucking hard carried his team to the championship. And then beyond that, even though he didn't win, he was an incredible player who was the best player in his team for 15 years or something. Right? That is actually, for me, a way more respectable career. A guy who's like, I did it my way with the players I wanted to play with. Yeah, okay, we didn't win, but I gave it my best chance. That's way cooler than being like, oh, I was doing that early on for the first few years, but then what I saw was like this other team's winning, so why don't I just join them and get a few of their championships? And that's kind of whack.
I agree with you. Not all championships are created equal. They're definitely not. There's some that are incredibly, incredibly meaningful, and there are some that are nearly meaningless, but it only counts when we talk about it in talk shows like this, or when you talk about it, like when you really, really dissect it, like 90%, 80% of the time, people are going to play the numbers game, and they're going to be like, well, I have 4, you have 1. Well, I have 2, you have 0. Like, majority of the time.
Do you think if we do a poll right now, and we're polling both fans and experts, like we'll poll the Korean coaches, the Korean players, and all we ask them is this: over their career, who was a better player? Who was a greater League of Legends player? Looper or Flame? Who do they pick?
Flame. I think I would.
Of course. Flame has no championships, motherfucker.
Flame has no championships. And
he technically has LPL, but he was a sub. He didn't play in that playoff, so he played at 1 game or something. So
Then we'll talk about like who is more financially successful, and then
who gives a fuck about money? Listen, I say this, by the way, as someone who literally makes more than anyone else in my field. Money is the most overrated quality in the entire world, because money doesn't come. You don't get money by chasing it. If you chase money, you'll end up with a tiny little bit of money. You get money by being excellent at something else and that being worth a lot on the market. So first of all, it never makes sense to chase it. You should chase excellence, and you will naturally get money. As long as you're not really shit at marketing and you're not a moron as a person, it will naturally come as a byproduct. And secondly, one day the money will be gone. Like one day that money will be gone, and all you'll have to show for it is some CDs and a fucking console game and a nice apartment. That's it. But you know what never ends is like knowing that you did something, to like the satisfaction of accomplishment. If you accomplish something great, an amazing quest, forged yourself into a legendary player, the money isn't that great. It's overrated.
Let me ask you, who do you think feels more accomplished, Flame or Looper?
If he wasn't a pussy, I'd say Flame should.
I think Looper would feel way more accomplished than Flame ever.
Yeah, because you know what? Look, I tricked you into that example, mate, because I picked someone who is blatantly fraudulent as a champion. Like, Looper was never the best player ever for 1 second in his life. He was never even a top 3 player in any team he ever played on, except maybe the shit Echo Fox. That's his career in a nutshell. If I can say about this guy who won the World Championship that he was only the best player or one of the best players on Echo Fox that finished like 7th in the LCS, that shows you this guy wasn't that great a player. So I agree, in his deluded mind, I've no doubt he thinks he's fucking sick. I mean, half the time, mate, he looks like he's waiting for like a fucking very interesting coloured bus to pull up and take him off to school. So I don't think he's particularly a sick player. So I think that's whack. I don't care if he gets deluded and all you guys kiss his ass to him. Oh, you won the championship. Who gives? No, he didn't. He didn't. Lupin has won 0 championships, guys. He happened to stand there and he was basically, he had VIP seating for some championships.
I know.
He was embedded in the game. He had the VR experience.
Like, whenever I advise players or they ask me for career advice, like I tell them, don't chase money and go to the best possible management and go to the best possible roster possible and win there. I think it's really hard advice to give and a really hard direction to push players. Like, you should go...
I wouldn't say that. That's how we're different than Loco. You know what I would say to a player? I would say this: go to the team that you think will play the best around you. Like, if you're a really sick player, like, to me, in fact, this is what's cool. The mentality of the old school sports stars wasn't, by the way, that they knew that their team would win. It's like the reason why people like Larry Bird, Michael Jordan are legends is their philosophies like this. First of all, when I compete, I'm really only competing against my peer. Like, Larry Bird competes against Magic Johnson. He doesn't really compete against everyone else in the league. He just competes against the other great player. So first of all, if we just team up, then we never know who was better because we just win all the championships together. And secondly,
that's
it's not
fine.
Win
all the championships. Like,
nah, that's whack. That's whack, mate. It's way cooler to win when it's like I beat the best guy in my era. That's way sicker.
Then in NBA right now, it's all about team up. Like, everything people are talking about, like Kyrie, so for people that don't know NBA, Kyrie is Kyrie is a star-level player. Kevin Durant, he's a star-level player. Kawhi Leonard, he's a star-level player. And the only thing people are talking about is where are they going to team up? Are they going to team up in Clippers? Are they going to team up in LA? Or with the Lakers? Are they going to team up in...
That's the end of civilization. That's a decayed society that has no values left. And as you say, only values temporary accomplishment. Like, I won the championship, I must be the best. And then money. That's all they care about. Like, that's actually whack as fuck. I think that's a really sad state of affairs for the sport. Because the aim of the game, by the way, I know this sounds like a cheesy thing. The aim of the game isn't to win the game, you know. It's to try and play the game as well as you can play the game.
No, aim of the game is to win. You play to win.
It isn't, no.
For me, it's you always play to win. What is it for you then? Chase greatness?
Like, to be as great a player as you can. Because, by the way, that you've just exactly went into the same flaw again. You've revealed it now in the game as well as your mentality for money. The aim of the game isn't to win, because what happens is if you play excellently, you will win most games. It's a byproduct, because excellent play in the context of the game is rewarded by getting ahead in the game, having advantages, overcoming, and that will naturally lead to winning the game. If you try to just win the game, you get what Griffin did in this LCK final. Griffin thought this was their best chance to win the game. They thought, you know what, we're actually not as good as SK Telecom, but maybe we can steal 2 games. Maybe we can just nick a couple out from under them. Now, if they'd have won, you know what, I could have gone to Griffin and gone, you know what, you did win, but deep down, you know you weren't as good. And you know what? I don't know if they would admit it, probably not, but they would on some level know, like, he's right. Like, you know,
I think that's with Griffin not realizing their level. I would actually be so fine with Griffin playing the finals this way if they were that much worse than SKT. Like, why I fucking hated Griffin playing this way is I don't think they were that much worse than SKT.
No, same.
Yeah. So that's where I have a problem with it, but I genuinely really think like pro gaming and your life as a pro gamer, your life as a coach is so short. Like, sure, greatness is great, and like getting extra credit on Listen Loco and Summoning Insight and Hotline League and the dive.
No, it's not about the credit. The idea is inside, you know you were great. You know you gave it everything. Like the best feeling ever in the world, Loco, believe it or not, is this. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite players of all time, NFL players, Peyton Manning, the quarterback of the Broncos and the Colts, right? And one of the things about his career, if you don't know, is because he only won his second championship on the way out the door when he basically got carried, he was super injured and like his career was over, right? A lot of people are going to be like, well, that one doesn't really count, you know, like it's only, he should really only have one ring. Well, the thing is, throughout his career, he was like someone who was like football royalty. Like he came in as the number one pick from a family that had been players. Like he's supposed to win all the. He's basically supposed to have the career Tom Brady had. He's supposed to have all the rings. So his career actually, on some level, Loco, is considered like a failure. Now, not entirely, because he still won 2 championships. He's still a very, very good player. He's one of the best players ever. But for what he could have done with his potential, he would be considered like an underachiever.
That's why.
But you know what he said when he retired? This line that is a really telling line, where he said that when you revere an experience, he said when you exhaust an experience, you can't help but revere it. And his point was, because he practiced as much as he could, because he prepped as much as he could, because he studied every aspect of the game, even though at the end you can say to him, you only won 2 championships, he could actually go to sleep and go, I did everything I could. Like, that means that's all I could win. Like, I couldn't win 10, it turns out. You know, I did everything I could. So whether I won, whether I lost, I have pure satisfaction. I did everything I possibly could. That's one aspect that I think is underrated. Because you know the reason why winning isn't actually that great a goal? Because you know how many players get mad salty forever about an amazing series they lost. So you know when the Rocks Tigers lost that series to SK Telecom at Season 6 Worlds, right? If you're only caring about winning, you have to go, fuck this whole series. Like, we lost it. It meant nothing. Our whole effort was worthless, was invalid. No, you played one of the best series of all time. You took one of the best lineups to the very limit and you almost beat them. You probably should have beat them. That's actually amazing. Like, even though you lost, I think when a great player plays an amazing game and loses, he still gets credit. Like, you get credit.
That's not how they felt. They felt like, fuck.
Yeah, because I'm a samurai. I'm not like your fuck boys trying to make fucking dollars and get Kesha to blow your dick or something in a nightclub and then go, oh, fucking, this is sick. Oh, I'm living such a baller lifestyle. Like music videos that were never real in the first place. They were just fucking propaganda for rap music, you morons. You think when they blow all the money like that, that's all ones. They're not putting fucking hundreds out on the stage. What, you think like Lil Wayne has $7 million income a year? No, of course he doesn't, you morons. He's probably got tax problems right now. Everything's fake. Hollywood's fake. The whole scene's fake. You get all the shit for free. You get comped everywhere. All you can accomplish in life is greatness. The greatness of the individual against the collective. That's what I represent. That's what I stand for. The samurai way. That's how we do it. We either go out on our sword or we go out with our fucking enemy's slid and the hands up. Take the lick off the blood. That's what we do.
There's not many samurais left in the world.
There aren't.
The world is
one
changing.
Of the last ones,
the world is changing.
It's not many. There's not many left. I agree with you. By the way, I totally agree. That is the new school philosophy, and that is what most people probably agree. So I agree. Even fans, I'm sure, probably think the same thing. I just don't, personally. So.
I mean, we can talk about like greatness and all that, but at the end of the day, like to give up a championship and to give up like quality of life and like, do you think Bjergsen was happy with like miserable teammates, like putting the work in and not winning the championship? He probably felt fucking miserable. Like, I know, like, when players are at that edge of greatness and they choose like friendship or they choose like loyalty instead of choosing better teammates or a better team or a slightly easier path that would still lead them to a championship or make it more likely to lead them to a championship, the players that didn't choose like the easiest path towards a championship, they regret it. They have regrets. Like, they go to sleep like thinking about what if, like, you know, when you talk about Peyton Manning, I'm sure, like, at the end of the day, he thinks, holy fuck, if I had Bill Belichick, holy fuck, if I had blah, blah, blah. Like, they'll think about that. Like, those are things that haunt you forever. Like, I feel like it's much easier to go to sleep knowing you have a ring at night and then, like, looking at the ring and being like, this is still meaningful to me. Like, this is still, like...
Yeah, but you know what isn't that satisfying is when you think like, oh, I've got these rings, and then someone goes, yeah, most of those aren't even yours, and you go, but wait a minute, no, there was a guy on your team, you had this player, the game was different, the opponents had an injury, like that hurts, mate. That gets to people. I can tell you, I can get to motherfuckers. You know that whole like, there's a Tupac line that says like, you can be touched, which was referring to the fact that anyone could be shot, anyone could be killed, right? He himself knows that very well. Shout out 1996 fucking Vegas Fight Club or whatever. But the point is, I can get to any of these motherfuckers that if they really believed what you're saying, they'd be impregnable. They'd be like, wow, I won the championship. I don't care what you are saying, Thorin. They all care. They're all just shook as fuck when you get to them with those lines.
What do you think about Jensen then? What do you think about Jensen going to TL and winning that championship instead of?
Oh, I told you this on the episode. That him winning that championship with Team Liquid means less than it would have if he'd have won any of them with Cloud9. It definitely does, of course. And by the way, if he'd have won even, I'm not exaggerating when I say this right now. Listen very carefully, everyone. If Jensen had won even one of those Cloud9 championships, I think that already would have given him a very reasonable discussion about who's better between him and Bjergsen. Because individually, there was never that much to separate the two. They were both very sick players. But if he'd have won one with the worst team and a team that hadn't won in ages in his era, that would be a fucking baller way to win. Whereas I agree, if you win and you're not even like, I mean, in this case, he did play fairly well, admittedly, not over the whole series. But if you play and you weren't even the best, like if you're the best player was a support player, like, or the jungler, it doesn't mean as much, does it? It's not as satisfying.
You know what the sad thing is? I think if Jensen stayed on C9 this foot, he would have had a really fucking...
I actually did this tweet when Team Liquid was down 0-2. I did exactly that tweet. I even said, the real irony here, because obviously it looked like TSM was going to win. Yeah. The real irony is if Jensen was just on this Cloud9, they probably beat Team TSM and beat Team Liquid and win the finals. Yeah. They probably do.
A lot of what ifs. All right, let's get back to LCK. So Seunghwan joined Gen G. I think it was announced today or yesterday. What's your thoughts on that?
Let me just double check what the lineup of Gen G was. That was the one that had
Peanut.
Peanut.
Yeah, Peanut would be who he's competing with.
Let me have a look here. Wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. Why have they done that as a roster move?
I think they don't think Peanut fits well into the team. And I do agree somewhat. Like, Peanut does...
Well, he doesn't. But that's the thing I don't... This is why I said Loco earlier. Like, some things I think Koreans are mega exaggerate. Like, you know what? I actually think Koreans are terrible at building rosters. I think they just get lucky when they build rosters. Like, I think what happens is they either just lock into some rookie being way better than he should be. But you actually see when they try and build a team, like I'm going to take this player from this team and this player, most of them aren't very good. That's why half these teams now look like fucking shit. Like, I think, and half the reason why, by the way, this is my theory, I'll float it past you very quickly, is global meta thinking. Is that Koreans all think there is a perfect way to play the game and they're all trying to track towards that perfect way if they can. And so they literally do that old cliche of taking like a fucking square peg and trying to ram it through a fucking round hole. And then if it doesn't work, they don't go, well, maybe I should take a square. They just go, right, this is broken and throw it away. Like the amount of great players that just got tossed on the side by Korea is mental. So like, I don't know even from day one why they recruited Peanut to this team. It never made any sense to me. It's like, what fucking lanes has he got to help? What can he possibly do?
You know what the sad thing is? I love Gen G as it work. I think Gen G, what if it treats their player really well? Like when they let go of the heroes. No, listen. When they let go of their heroes of the Storm team and they actually celebrate it, they help them become streamers. They're not just about the money team. Like they actually treat their players very well. Like they don't drop them on like the dime. Like
it's all just about money and championships. Sorry guys, Loco says no, that shit matters. So you fucking losers, get your shit together. Money and championships is all that matters. In Loco's mind,
that's what matters for a player. That's what matters for a player. But
if we take the same mentality that Loco was using, his favorite company, Monsanto, the one that does all that fucking shady practices and produces all those crops and fucks with all the indigenous farmers. Like what? Loco, he's just all about the top dollar, making all the money, corporate espionage. Basically, House of Cards is Loco's actual version of spirituality in this world.
Well, anyways, to get back
dog eat dog. Well, to be fair, dog eat dog, that could be kind of a bit controversial in your country, couldn't it? Why waste that good food on a dog?
To get back to Gen G, I think they run their business well. They treat their players well. I think their socials are good, and they're trying to do things the right way. But they just fucking suck so much at building rosters in League of Legends, and their leadership sucks in terms of like League of Legends. Like get better people to run your team in terms of like GM, or hire an actual GM whose job is solely to build rosters in Korea. Because what the fuck are you doing? Like, you made Peanut the highest paid jungler and your team is falling apart around you. Like, Cube, Fly, like the only real good player they have, only truly really valuable piece they have is Ruler. Like, I don't understand that team. They have so much money, they run so well, and they can't
that's the most
function as a
criminal
team.
part for sure. Like, one of the things I don't get about this team at all is it's not like this is a new experience that Peanut has these flaws. He's been a super flawed player for like 3 or 4 years now, Loco. It's been a long time. We've seen this happen in teams. So like, why they thought it wouldn't happen to them, I have no clue whatsoever. And I agree with you. With the money they have, they should have bought at least one superstar carry for this team. Like, they should have had like some sick mid laner, or they should have fucking shelled out a lot of money for like one of the Koreans to come back from LPL to be a top laner or something. Like, they should have gone big time in the market on this one. Because even if this had worked out, they still would, like, in my opinion, even if this lineup worked out in every regard, they would have been like the 6th or 5th best team. You know, they wouldn't have been a super top team.
They're just like they're loyal to weird players. They're loyal to Cube. Why? They're loyal to Fly. Why? And then you pick up Peanut on top of that. Like, I understand.
Well, I have to say, to be fair, you know, they're probably using the fucked up logic of like, these guys were world champions. It's like, I always said this to people. The reason why you can't go too crazy about Samsung winning worlds. And by the way, remember, they could actually won 2 worlds. Like the other one in season 6, they were obviously very close to winning as well. But the fact that they never even made a single fucking LCK final is very telling of those lineups. Like, they actually weren't as good as people made out. They just were good at worlds. Like, once you saw them in LCK, they used to be Garbo in the LCK playoffs, mate. Like, that was already an overrated team. So it's bad enough, as you saw last year, where you keep too many players who used to be champions when they're past their prime. They kept players past their prime who weren't even like the best anyway. So, like, now it's even more egregious.
The other weird thing is they're like, okay, we don't want to be a late game bottom oriented team anymore. And we think with Core JJ and how Core JJ likes to shot call, we're going to be a late game bottom oriented team. That's no longer what League of Legends is, and we want to shift. We want to shift into being more aggressive. We want to play around junglers. We're going to pick up Peanut. They did the exact opposite of that. They let go of Core JJ, and Core JJ took his style to NA, and he won a championship with it. And they took Peanut, and they tried to shove Peanut into being like the supportive jungler that they wanted, like play our style. Like, it was just so backward what they did. I can't believe like so many smart people and such a well-run org can make the same mistake like over and over again. Like, it's mind-blowing.
That's what happens when you have people who are inexperienced or don't know what they're doing. They're just trying to figure shit out on the fly. Because for people who don't know, they've actually had exactly the same problems in Overwatch. Like, they're the team that's behind the Seoul Dynasty, for anyone who doesn't know. And that is literally the most underwhelming of all the all-Korean teams. That's the team that never made the playoffs, never did anything significant, like had a bunch of legendary players. You notice the trend here. Had a bunch of legendary players who aren't as good anymore, but they keep sticking them in the team anyway. Had dodgy coaching staff. Like, it all applies to the whole org, because I actually do think that even though, yes, game to game, it's going to depend on what players you have, like, the culture you create in an org does permeate all the teams, in my opinion.
One silver lining for them, I think, is they are the reign over Team Liquid. They are the money. They're the team with a lot of money, team with a lot of dream, and team that wants to, be a great team. And they're like a year away, and they're learning their mistakes now. Like, I feel like this is that year for them where they shelled out for a big player and it's not working out, and next year they're going to be smarter about it. They have incredibly smart people on their management team, so I can't expect them to be dumb over and over
If
again.
I'm this team, then what I am doing is I am setting up like NBA teams do, where you plan like 2 years in advance. Like, right, we're going to target this player, and we're going to make sure we have like this cap space. I would be doing that. And I would literally be getting ready to try and get some of those sick Koreans that are in LPL. Those are the players you should try and get. Like, you should get fucking Scout to come back to Korea. Or you should get fucking Doinby to come and be the fucking in-game leader. And tell you what, you'll have no late game problems then. You should get some of these super sick Korean players that still play. And absolutely, like, I'll tell you what's the name of that guy? I'm trying to think who else was good this split. I'll tell you who's a mad underrated player. You can remember him from the old school. He used to be on Zenix. Gimgoon. You remember that guy? There's another player you could bring back. These are all players who would do great in LCK, by the way. Like, they're really good players. It's just that they don't all have the name value of others. Well, that's what's great, is the only thing you need right now is the money to buy them from the Chinese orgs. I'm sure a lot of them would want to come back to Korea if they think they're going to be on a top team. So I think they've got to make better advantage of that. Like, don't keep looking for rookies in Korea. Like, odds are that crop's done because we just got all these sick players in Sandbox, Damwon, and Griffin. I doubt you've got like a ton of them.
So there's other thing that's going around in LCK right now is LCK is still one of the major leagues that hasn't been franchised yet. So there's actually relegation still going on. It's Jin Air, KT, and two challenger team, VSG, and there's one more, VSG, and I forgot the other one. But what do you think about Jin Air and KT having to play for their life? Like, oh yeah, ESS Sharks. And
well, I saw that KT already qualified, so now it's like Jin Air against the Sharks team is the last game, basically. The problem is Jin Air isn't a good team. They just actually ended up having a couple of good players. Like, the bot lane ended up being decent, and as everyone discussed on the LS episode, bizarrely, they could sometimes get into a decent position even against good teams. So they're not like totally terrible. So I actually think it's totally logical that unless this ES Sharks team's like way better than I think, and I don't think they are. Like, if you look, they've got a couple of players that you definitely know before, Kuzan, etc. Like, logically, they should probably get back in LCK. The problem is the bottom end of LCK is fucking terrible. Like, it's not like KT was down there because the league was super competitive. They were down there because they were bad. It was depressing.
What BDD actually looked great in relegations, and kind of the question that I have is KT gonna be fine if they just replace their bot lane, or they have to start looking at jungle now with Score getting older, and they also have to, what do you do with Smeb? Like, BDD is like the only surefire player they have.
That's the problem, is like, it's not even just the team. This entire lineup never got to the server. Like, you would think to yourself, right, well, even if things go badly with the new bot lane, you've got the amazing top side of the map. You've got these two fucking MVP solo laners. You've got Score. Mate, Score doesn't look like the old Score if you watch him this year. He looked a lot worse. Like, he looked to me like someone who does know it's his last year. And then when it's going badly, he's sort of like just phoning it in a bit. And then Smeb looked a lot worse over the split. Like, you can still be on a bad team and individually ball out and look good. Like, he didn't look very good most of the time. BDD, I thought at times looked good, but overall, fairly average split. So actually, I don't think anyone on that team of the big names had like a great split. Because everyone's going to go, yeah, but it's a lot harder on a worst. Yeah, it is, but you can still look good. Teddy and players have shown us that. So even though in theory, if some of those players play better, you will be better, I actually don't think this team looks like it's going to contend at all. Like, you look at the players, you can sometimes get this. This is why roster building in League is very hard. Like, if you get players that are very good individually, but they don't work well together, it's just over.
Dude, when you think of the old KT team, like, UCal isn't even a starter anymore. Smeb and Score are in relegations.
Oh, it's depressing, isn't it?
Def got his team to third place, and Mata won LCK. Like, it's crazy. Like, I like, when you think of that old KT team, I think the top side, like, regarding like UCal, Score, and Smeb, like, we're fucking legit. Like, maybe it's terrible roster building, maybe it's rest of LCK coming up with Griffin and Sandbox, but a year ago, if you told me like 3 members from KT would either be in relegations or not even playing, like, I would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is one of the best teams in the world. Like, these are absolute top tier class players.
The sad thing is, like, they couldn't have known this at the time. I don't blame them at all. But if they just kept that same KT lineup from last year, they might be champions again. They might have won this split as well. Really could have. Yeah. I mean, I get why they didn't, because when they failed at Worlds, they were like, you know, whatever. We only had the one success anyway, so let's break it up, because they had tried that core for 2 years. I totally get it, but like, you look, that's the problem with hindsight.
They picked the wrong core. They should have taken their bottom lane. Do you think it was I mean, we're talking about it in hindsight, where one side is in relegations and one side is in like playoffs and in contention. Do you think it was the wrong decision to keep the top side of the map instead of keeping the bot side?
In a way, I don't. In as much as, like, everyone knows that one of the flaws of every Mata team is that they have to be Mata teams, basically, because he's such like a dominant thinker about the game, and you have to kind of play things his way. So the problem is, if you kept him, you're not just keeping the bot lane, you're keeping his style of play. So you would have to like be very creative, I think, with how you recruited elsewhere on the map. So I get why they chose Smeb over death didn't matter because like Smeb is still a young player. He's apparently still very hungry, still wants to play a long time. No one knows. For all we know, Mata might retire next year. Maybe he will. I think he's about 25, 26 now. He's getting up there, you know, he's probably on the down end of his career. So if just in terms of being like cynical as a team owner, it makes more sense to think if I can get 5 years of Smeb over 2 years of Mata, of course, that makes a lot of sense. But I agree with you. Like, here's the difference, is if I just keep that KT bot lane, there's a lot of players that can put around that bot lane that would be very fucking good. Whereas the difference is, as you've seen here, I know there was extra circumstances where they thought they were going to get Prey, but the rest of the team, that ended up looking very ropey, the players they ended up getting.
So Mata, I think interesting thing is if he stayed on KT, I don't think he would have ever been as this good. You know how kind of Doublelift became a better teammate and he learned to play as a team when he went on to TSM because there was someone he respected just as much as he respected himself or even more in Bjergsen. I think Mata kind of got that when he got to SKT. And regarding like the coaching staff, regarding Faker, and regarding the name around SKT, if he stayed on KT, I think he would have been just as stubborn and not worked on his weakness.
Could well be.
Oh, another really interesting thing I wanted to talk to you about was all the second Fakers. Like, you know, the original second Faker was like Pond, the one after that was BDD, and then there's like Yukao, and then there's Chovy. Sure. The only real second Faker that I feel like that actually we can talk about as a second Faker is Rookie, and he didn't stay in Korea. I think all the other second Fakers were kind of like, they don't deserve that name, and that's a name like we give out so often, and it felt so great when Faker. I mean, Chovy is actually one of the arguably the more closer ones, but in the Trash Talk episode, or in the Trash Talk like leading up to the finals, Faker's like, no, it's not Chovy's time yet. No, don't compare Chovy.
Like, I would say that is generally, by the way, like a hallmark of the best player is the idea that they shouldn't really generally have rivals if possible. Like, they just beat all their rivals. Therefore, it's, you know, it's easy to say they were the best player. So I would agree. There's definitely that factor with Faker where no one else could like maintain the same standard. Because you're right. Even though people will say, yeah, but Rookie's been amazing for 3 or 4. It's like, yeah, he's only been in China though. And even then, it's not like he won the championship in China every year. So like, that's a bit overplayed. Individually, he was basically Rookie versus Faker is like Jensen versus Bjergsen. Like, the problem is, even if you can make the argument, which you can, like, skill-wise, it's pretty close. It's like, yeah, but then one guy has all the championships. Like, that kind of, you know, it doesn't end the debate, but it makes it a lot more uphill for the person trying to argue the guy without the championships. So I would just say on that angle, like, I think the reason why is actually a very shrewd one as well, which is, I actually think if Faker had played just to only his strengths, like say he'd said, I'm always going to be the hard carry of every team I'm on. Like I'm like forgiven of mid lane. Every team that we make has to be all around me, has to be my power picks. Jungler has to gank my lane, and I'm going to carry the game. And like I'm going to be like Michael Jordan, basically. By being the best player, I'm going to make us the best team, and that's our route to victory. If he'd have done that, he'd have a lot less championships. Now, what's mad is he might actually have an even better rep as an individual player. Like maybe he'd have had even more seasons where he just fucking styled on everyone and picked crazy shit and carried when he weren't supposed to carry. But the problem is he would have less championships. So the reason why Faker has probably had the perfect career is at the times when he could be the best, he was the best and his team was the best. And then some of the years where like it was more questionable or the champ pool didn't always fit like what he wanted to play, he was willing to play Lulu and fucking Lissandra and Xerath. And, you know, he was willing to just play Rise when it wasn't even like the strongest champions. He was willing to play these Galio. He was willing to play shit to help his team win. So he's like not only the best player, he's like the ultimate fucking teammate. He's got a great mind for the game. Like I think he's just completed his whole skill set.
There's just certain things like that bother me so much, like certain terms. I think the second Faker thing is such a fucking... It's been ridiculous. Like there's been 5 second Fakers and only one of them can like be relevant and it's like an actual discussion for something. Like I hate that term. Anytime there's a new good Korean mid, like that's the first term that gets put on that player, and I'm like, no, like let's not. Like Faker has like a mountain of accomplishment and like such a long period of being great. Like this guy to be considered second Faker needs such a long time to even match up to that point.
That's why the real storyline that I hope does happen, like I hope it happens next year basically, is that Rookie just fucking comes back to the LCK. Like it doesn't matter what happens now. Even if he wins Worlds again, eventually, if you are rookie and you have a chance to be considered greatest of all time, but to do it, you've got to come to Korea. You've got to win LCK legit, because when he won, like, mate, he wasn't the best player on that fucking KTRO's team. Like, Kakao was a better player at the time, and they won very, very close. If he comes back to LCK and he wins LCK straight up, and he's going head-to-head with Faker and Chovia, then he can be considered the greatest. Like, that'll be his chance.
I don't think he ever comes...
Even though LPL now is really good, he'll never be considered the best.
I don't think he'll ever come back, and if he does come back, I hope it's like a super team roster with Genji. I hope it's like rookie plus Keen plus Ruler plus like a jungle and a support player. I hope when rookie comes back, he also gets like a stacked team, and then like it's like that, not like rookie comes back to like a shitty team and tries to make it happen like with Kakao or something. Not like that, but with like an actual stacked up team.
Rookie, come back, join Damn One Gaming, and then Flame and Rookie just fucking tear up the LCK, they win Worlds, they're all remembered as the greatest players of all time. Yeah, I can see it happening vividly, yeah.
Okay, so final topic to end on. There's been a little bit of drama, like it's been a constant drama regarding League of Legends subreddit, and for majority of content creator, I'm luckily starting to be a little bit more and more independent of Reddit. Like, I think you're very independent of Reddit, but for majority of content creators, Reddit is very much like how they succeed or not, and like it gives them the growth to actually survive. And Inven's actually banned from Reddit. Upcomers is banned from Reddit. Score
Holy shit, really?
Banned from Reddit. So they all got banned for vote manipulation. So I mean, great for me. My interviews have very little competition other than Travis because of that. But Reddit is like a huge thing for League content creators, and you can explain the rest of the detail. I kind of explain like the drama around it.
Sure. I mean, this is complicated because the problem is like one of the first problems that you have talking about this topic is that most people in life are plebs. Like, they're just a random person who doesn't know about the topic that we're talking about. So if you tell a normal person, this person broke the law, they're going to go, all right, he should go to jail then. And you're going to go, whoa, wait a minute. Like, we have to discuss, is the law just? Like, should someone be punished for that? Like, no one has that discussion, Loco. So if they hear, someone broke Reddit's rules, it's like, yeah, well, what were the rules? Like, were the rules reasonable? Were they fair? So you have to have that discussion first. So first of all, the whole vote manipulation angle, if they literally vote manipulated, as in they took the link and they put it into a Skype group that had every writer for their site, and every writer clicked the link and upvoted it, I could argue that is kind of a bit shady. You're not supposed to do that. Now, every shitter is going to tell me, but everyone does that. Well, first of all, I've never done that. Like, you can go back through my whole history, and that's something I've never engaged in, because I always knew that you could potentially get banned, and since it's going to cost you livelihood, it's not worth it. So there's that angle. Then there's the factor that my problem is if they mean stuff like just posting too many things or posting stuff to Twitter, because that was always corrupt as fuck when they used to say, you can now, but back in the day you weren't allowed to post like a tweet of the link or whatever. That never made sense, because that was like, logically, Reddit wants more traffic. So why wouldn't they want people who want to see the article going, clicking it and enjoying the article? That seems perfectly reasonable to me. So I always thought that was unfair. My biggest problem in this situation is, like, I'll give you an analogy I once heard from a basketball coach, and it was where he was explaining how you deal with difficult players. He said, if you've got a player that's a good player, but he's known to have like some personality problems, or it's a bit trickier to deal with him, what you do is when you get the team at the beginning of the season, you design some rules, and you're going to have to make the rules a little bit more lax than you would have without this player. Because what you want to do is, this is the analogy, you want to draw a box around everyone right now while they're all stood still and say, right, that's the rules, just stay inside the rules. And yes, obviously the troublemaker is going to be like this close to the edge of the box, right? But he said, if you use that analogy, you then encourage the player to tell him, like, listen, I know who you are. I know you're a bit tricky to deal with, but I'm going to make some reasonable rules. And if you can keep within them, you can be who you are. Like, I won't like force you to be a different person. But if you make the rules without thinking of the players, and you make them really strict, and before you've even started, this player would be outside of your hypothetical box, then he can never succeed. It can never work at that point in time, because he's definitely going to cross the line. The problem with Reddit is this, right? Is their job is just supposed to be like a really cool janitor. They're there to clean up the mess and to make sure that the parts that don't make sense aren't there and that things are nice and tidy. But they're not doing that. They're instead acting like they're the censor. Like, their job is to review everything that comes in and goes, is this actually a good piece of content? I personally think it isn't, so I'm going to remove it. Like, that's not their job. They aren't the arbiters of taste for the people on that subreddit. They aren't the people who are there to determine every possible way that something's relevant. They're there to maintain a fairly simple set of rules. And if possible, best case scenario, they should be invisible. You should just go, wow, what a great sub. I don't know what the subreddit, what they actually do, but the sub seems great, so they must be doing something. Instead, we have the opposite. We have a scenario where tons of content that is relevant to League of Legends, that people want to see, is getting removed. We have people who are great content creators who can't have their work on Reddit. We have fans who are noticing, where is all this shit? Like, why the fuck are they removing it? It's like they're working against all the community that is on their subreddit. And the reason why that's a big deal is because, yeah, you're right. I could survive without Reddit. But you know what? Even I won't enjoy it, Loco. Because if I do let's say I do, okay, I have an article coming up, I'm going to write about Yankos, okay? Right? Even if I publish it and it gets great hits, it's still not as satisfying to know that everyone who only goes through Reddit won't see the article. Like, a lot of those people will just never know I wrote that article. Like, another reason you write stuff isn't just hits, it's so that everyone has a chance to experience it. You want to share it with the community, don't you?
What's bullshit about it is I feel like the community built Reddit, like the creators and the pros.
Of course it
like,
did.
We built that Reddit subreddit to have millions and millions of subscribers. And then
now, this is the whole reason why Richard Lewis gets so triggered. It's not that Richard Lewis didn't do anything wrong. He did some things that were a little bit questionable, right? But the real reason he would never get unbanned is because the Reddit mods treated him as though they were superior and they'd done him favors by letting him post on Reddit. Whereas it's like, whoa. Let's get one thing straight right now. The only thing Reddit is a content aggregator. It takes content and it aggregates it together and decides which is better and which is worse. The Reddit mods create zero of that content. They create nothing of what is the literal lifeblood of their subreddit. Who creates the content? Content creators. So literally, Reddit mods are fucking parasites on Reddit content creators, but they're gaslighting the content creator to say, I'm everything, you're nothing, and if you're lucky, I'll let you give me the one thing I need to survive. Now listen, practically, they're right. If they cut me out, there will always still be other content creators. It will still survive. But that is a really fucked up position to come from as a mentality, because your mentality should be like, I want to work with the content creators. Like, yeah, I don't want them to break the rules, but I want to make sure they understand why the rules exist this way, why things go a certain way. So for example, I had a piece of content removed recently, which was an article about Doublelift versus Bjergsen. And when it got removed, I'm thinking like, but I haven't broken any rules. Like, this is totally legit. It's definitely relevant to League of Legends. The reason it was removed, Loco, all they would tell me was, well, it wasn't a front page post, so we're not going to give you an official reason, but we'll just say that your site also hosts banned content, which actually isn't even true. What happened is some new fucking mod of Reddit went to the Deserto site, which is who I write for now, and on the side of the site, there was an advert saying the Richard Lewis show or something, you know, like some show that he does with Deserto. So this moron in his brain goes, wait a minute, so Deserto hosts Richard Lewis and he's banned, so we have to remove Thorin's piece. Now, here's the thing, Loco. Richard Lewis's piece isn't hosted on Deserto. He has a video on Deserto's YouTube channel, not the website. So as a result, not only did they not get it correct, but secondly, by that logic, you now have to remove all YouTube videos. Well, they're not going to do that, are they? So it's an inconsistent ruling. So the point here is, this isn't a scenario where I've broken a rule or someone else has broken a rule. Like, they're going out of their way to target people who literally helped build their Reddit. You know how many fucking AMAs I've done on that subreddit where I've done literally answers. I've done thousands of words of answers for free AMAs that promote that subreddit. And yet I'm treated at the end like I'm a fucking illegal immigrant desperately trying to sneak under the fence. And they're like the fucking patrol guard, like, hey, get him out of here. It's like, that's the way they treated me after all that. I've never ever been disrespectful to them. I've never ever had a message where I've told them to go fuck themselves. These people don't know. It was easy to wreck Richard Lewis because he'd also said a lot of spicy stuff, so fans aren't going to side with him. It's going to be a real bad look when everyone turns against Reddit, because I'll do it if they keep fucking with me.
My problem is, like, I've actually talked to Reddit mods before, like, whenever there was inappropriate content of me, like, I messaged them separately and asked them to get it removed, and they removed it. Like, I don't have as bad of a relationship I have with them, but I do share the sentiment. Why aren't we working together? Like, Reddit is great for you and me. Like, a lot of the reason my content picked up popularity, I will definitely credit to Reddit. And Reddit was a huge help to me. But I also help Reddit by putting my good content on there, and it's mutually beneficial. Like, why doesn't Reddit and the content creators work together? Why is it this, like, power tripping from Reddit? Why
Unfortunately, I can tell you the reason
from
why.
like content creators? I don't understand.
I'll give you a quick summary, right? Basically, here's the problem. There's two aspects here. One is human nature, and the other is the way Reddit as a company works. So the human nature angle is this, Loco. If you've had any experience on the internet with people who are moderators, so before Reddit, it would be moderator of an IRC channel, of a forum like Inven or DC Inside. If you've ever met these people who are the moderators, there's only two types of moderator, Loco. There's the guy who is literally the nicest guy in the world, and he's just like the bitch of everyone else. And he's literally just helping in the same way as some college kid goes to Africa to help like people who have like fucking AIDS. You know, he's just trying to be the nicest guy ever and help everyone, right? There's either that guy, and that's very rare, or there's people who look at the role of moderator and what they see is, right, so it's a position that you don't get paid for. It doesn't really have fame, but you have a little bit of power. And then the second type of person, it's the same as politics, is it's not that you have to be corrupt to be a politician. It's that to be corrupt is the most obvious type of person who is attracted to politics because you can use your power. So it's the same with moderators. People who, if you're, by the way, this is something that's quite interesting. You won't know this, but when Richard got fucked over by the Reddit mods, this guy's a professional journalist of 20 years' work. He went and he researched all the Reddit moderators and found out who they all are. And I'm just going to give you a spoiler, Loco. They have the most dreadful social lives of anyone you can ever imagine. They really are that super nerd on the internet who's like, I'll fucking ban you off my internet for a man. You will not disrespect me. They really are that guy. Like, they're all like, the mods who are mods of other subreddits, they're fucking mega losers. The mods who are on these channels are like people who've never done anything. That's their only claim to fame, is they're a Reddit mod. So they are mad corrupt. Now, here's the second part, and I'll be very quick on this. Unfortunately, the structure of Reddit could counteract that. If they said to Reddit mods, say, hey, you've stepped out of line, like, you've got to come back, or here's a guideline I'm going to give you, you know, please don't remove content that is about the players and the teams, you know. Like, the problem is this, Loco. Because Reddit as a company doesn't make money. I don't know if you know this. They're one of those companies that's massive, and they have massive influence on the world.
They have ads on the side.
But they do not make much money. They lose money as a company. So if you know that, then you will understand this second quality. The people who get paid by Reddit are called admins. They're not called moderators. They're head admins of the site. They have salaries. They're in a company. Mods are all volunteers. There's not a single mod in the world, as far as I know, gets paid to be on Reddit. So as a result, I once had a situation, I'll tell you very briefly, where I reached out to the Reddit admins and I contacted them because there was a Reddit mod on League of Legends who, when some of my content was removed, he said something mental, like, well, actually, all of his content should be removed because all of his work is hate speech. Now, first of all, not only is that a ridiculous statement, but hate speech in the UK is an actual legal term. And it is something that you can be prosecuted for and go to prison for. So I contacted Reddit admins and said, you are aware, right, that one of your mods is publicly accusing me of a crime in my country. That is literally like fucking libelous. Like, I could sue this guy and your site. And what they said to me was this, Loco. It's a generic response they give. They said, sorry to hear you had a bad experience with Reddit. Since all of our moderators are volunteers, we give them a lot of leeway with how they moderate their subreddit. Now, if you know what that means, by the way, what they're saying is, we let them do whatever the fuck they want. They work for free. We don't pay them anything. So the way we reward them is they can abuse their power. That's literally what they're telling you. So if you know that, any hope just goes out the window. That's game over, right?
I want a solution. I want to work with Reddit. Like, I like that things are getting upvoted on Reddit, even though I only have 70 to 80% upvote rate because people still hate me. Like, I want to work with Reddit and I want to find the solution. Like, it's frustrating, Reddit mods. Like, we want to work with you. Like, I'm not.
You got to meet us halfway at least, though, for fuck's sake.
Maybe Thorin doesn't want to work with you. Maybe Thorin just wants to flame you.
No,
but like,
I have never ever flamed them. Like I told you, people don't know this. You know the reason behind the scenes, by the way, why I never have any problems in my career. It's because I don't actually have any real sets of people who hate me. I have people who dislike me for my opinions. As my actual job, I'm always respectful of all the people I work with.
I think Travis wants the same thing. And maybe Rich, I don't know how Richard Lewis feels. I honestly don't know the guy, but I'm pretty sure it would benefit him too if there's like a solution found. It's just like this war against content creators with Reddit. Like, it doesn't make sense for the content creators and it doesn't make sense for Reddit. And I don't understand why there is.
It's also disrespectful. Like, think about how they treat us. They treat us, Loco, as though me, and just a guy with a blog who started tomorrow are the same in terms of value as content creators? No, of course not. Even in terms of being cynical, think of your business. If you want, like, obviously Reddit wants lots of hits and action on their front page, right? Who's more likely to bring that action, me or the random guy with a blog? It's obviously me. But they act as though, technically anyone could submit an article for him. You're just identical to them. It's like, oh, well, you know what then? If I'm identical to them, I'll treat you as identical to the guy who has to, the guy in fucking Burger King, where if I trip over and spill my burger, it's like, go on, old dude, clean that fucking burger up. Shall I treat you that way, shall I? I haven't ever done that to a Reddit mod, but I guess I should if they're going to be as condescending to me. Like, that's a really disrespectful attitude. And like I say, the worst part of it is, it betrays a mentality that is 180. It's where the parasite thinks it's the host.
I don't think it's parasite and host. I think it's mutually beneficial. Like Reddit mods, like you should get.
It is at the moment in symbiotic relationship. I agree, but at the moment it's a parasite host.
It should be a symbiotic, and I do think honestly Reddit. I want better moderation, and if better moderation means like Reddit has to get monetized and we have to see more ads, or maybe like people can fucking subscribe to Reddit. Like there's like people throwing money for Reddit Gold anyways. Then make sure like the mods get paid and they can spend more time, and you guys can hire people that can actually do a good job and can like put time into it, because it is paid work. It's just a really fucking weird like state at its at, the war between content creators and Reddit. Like the fact that there is a war between content creators and Reddit.
It's just a sad state of affairs. And by the way, a last side issue that needs to be brought up is not only do mods abuse power for the fun of having power and abusing it, unfortunately, Local, one of the reasons they also do it is to make themselves relevant. Because if you are invisible, if you just do a great job removing stuff that's not to do with League or it breaks a rule, no one will know you. You won't be famous. But you know what? If you're the guy, like a referee in the sports, who's like, shh, that's a foul right at the end of the game, you'll be remembered forever. You have a lot of relevance then. You get a lot of power. Like, it'll go to your head. So I would just say that aspect as well. Like, sadly, the reason I say it's human nature, I don't think you can overcome it, Loco, is it's not all the Reddit mods are unreasonable. There's been a couple I've known over the years that were like actually very reasonable. In fact, that's how people like me and Richard Lewis know what the mods are like, because we have people inside the mod group who, when fucked up things would happen, would come to us privately and say, by the way, like, I'm a mod, here's what's going on. And so those guys are cool. But the problem is, if you know anything about how corrupt organizations work, the way corruption works is once you get enough corrupt people, they all band together and kick out the legit people. So you can't have like one cool person and 9 arseholes. The one cool person isn't going to influence the 9 arseholes. The 9 arseholes are going to band together and go, let's fucking kick that one guy out, actually. So that's why, unfortunately, I personally don't have hope for the future. It's like politics.
What do you think
it's going to be corrupt forever.
What do you think the end game for Reddit and content creators are?
I've always thought it was a flawed system. So my approach has always been this. As long as we need it, just make do with what the situation is. It's like being at war. You just live with being at war. That's just the situation. It can't be perfect. We're never going to win. Like your idea of like, let's work with them, etc. That'd be great, Local, if no one had tried that. Everyone's tried that. Everyone. I've messaged them a million times.
What if as a collective? What if, like, let's just start with the biggest 3 or the most reachable 3. You meet Travis. I almost said you.
They're not going to care. You know what I guarantee their response would be?
What?
They would actually get annoyed, Local, that we think of ourselves as like big content creators, like really relevant. They'd be like, you're just another Reddit user like anyone. I'm serious. That is what I think their mentality would be.
Like if you, me, and Travis like wrote a letter to Reddit mods talking
about
like some of the rules and some of like, hey, we want to like work with you. Like we want to fix this. Like we provide good content to Reddit. Like we appreciate what you do, but situation fucked up. Like if 3 of us like offered the olive branch and talked about how we can make things better, they'd be like, go fuck off. Like we don't give a shit.
I've told this story before, but I forget if it was on this show. I'll tell a very, very quick story. So I once had a Reddit moderator out of nowhere send me a DM, and the DM said on Reddit, like, hey, was just wondering, like, if you have any thoughts on something like, you know, is there any like rules that we currently have that stop you from being able to create some content or do something? And I actually just replied to this guy, like, you know, within an hour or something. I just said like, I haven't actually thought about that, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you some thought and I'll come back with some notes. Like I'll give like a top 5 things I can think of. And this guy, this is mental, Local, when you hear this response. This guy comes back at me with like a mad clap back saying something like, oh, if you're not going to respect my time and you're just going to say that you're going to do it later, then in that case, like, forget about it. It's like, and I literally just said, like, I don't know who you think you are or what you think this conversation is. You came to me, you messaged me, I've been entirely respectful, and you have completely disrespected me with the way you are talking to me right now. Like, if you understand that mentality, Local, from someone who's never done anything to them, it's hard to overcome that. Like, if someone's going to treat you like a piece of shit before you ever even talk to them, At that point, this is this is where I side with Richard Lewis. Why would I have to like beg and grovel to some fucking moron just because he blocks my way on a subreddit? You know what? If you're evil and you actually just want to ruin the world, go ahead and ruin the world. I'm not going to take any responsibility for it. And I definitely don't have to come along to you every 10 minutes and go, please stop fucking the world up and being an arsehole. No, it's actually on you to stop being an arsehole. I'm just going to keep doing my shit. I'm going to keep following the rules. I'm going to keep killing it the way I do anyway. And I'm going to let all the arseholes of the world be arseholes and fail on their own account. I don't have to help them.
Okay. To end the episode, when I write that letter, I'll write it, and Thorin, you just sign off on it. You don't write anything in it, please.
I'm not gonna write anything in it. Don't worry about it.
Just sign off on it. Okay.